across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's Friday. We've reached the end of yet another massive week of news, and here we are ready to go to the weekend. It's going to be very, very hot, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be 30-something, apparently, if you're in the southeast. I know, as ever, the usual rejoinder. If you're in the north, it might not be quite that nice. If you're in Scotland, of course, you need to be putting about 3 coats on and a scarf. But no, seriously, it is really beautiful. Another fantastic day in the city yesterday, and so we've got an awful lot of hot news for you. The hottest day of the year it was yesterday, 32 degrees for people who were at Royal Ascot. Even they had to go and try and find some shade. I've got Deanna Davison back. Deanna, very good morning to you. Welcome back. It's beautiful, isn't it? Fantastic to be back in Britain in the summertime. We've got lots of big stories for you this morning. The papers have all got very, very different leads in them. The main thing going on in the Middle East, of course, is that Donald Trump has apparently said he's going to think about it for a couple of weeks before he decides what to do about bombing Iran. I'm wondering whether that is just a bit of a ruse, and he could well be gearing up to do something this weekend. We will see. We'll be talking to a few experts about that over the course of the show. Also, Robert Jenrick's writing in the Daily Mail this morning about the assisted dying bill, which is going through today. We haven't really done an awful lot on this because, for me, it's something that people either feel very personally strongly about or very, very personally strongly against, a bit like the abortion bill. But I'm very happy to take in your views today if you want to talk about it. Jenrick basically is against it, and he says he's against it because of his nan, because he thinks that, you know, actually it's a bad idea to go around killing members of your family. You know, I can't say I disagree with him. Gary Glitter's on the front page of the Daily Mirror saying, please don't let me out, I'm still a danger to young girls. And of course, the big story, I think, of the day is the possible strike that's coming in the NHS. Consultants on the front page of the Times saying they want 35% of a pay rise. These are people who make in excess of £120,000 a year, and that's before they even get any kind of private work, which most of them get. So these are people who are, I think, the worst of the NHS, the greediest of the NHS, the people who say, you know, we can't get by on 120 grand a year, we need to get more like £200,000 a year, and then we might be happy. Also, doctors are saying it's so hot they might want to have permission to go on strike because it's too hot to work. Well, that's completely and utterly ridiculous. But migrants are back in the news as well. There's one particular guy who's come here on his own, in his own dinghy. He was picked up having gone adrift in the Channel. He's come from northern France. He's got a dog with him. So this is obviously the new form of travel. Don't pay a trafficker. Just get your own dinghy and come across on your own. Absolutely extraordinary. What next? Are they all going to come in paragliders? You know, it's absolutely ridiculous. 0344 499 1000 is the number. And also, if you live in the south of the country, your council tax is going up in order to pay for people in the north. That's the way it goes. Talking about a two-tier country, a two-tier society, two-tier Keir. We'll be talking about him as well, the Prime Minister. I don't know what he's up to this weekend, and it's almost bound to be doing some kind of ruin to the economy. Don't forget the podcast. If you don't listen to the whole show, you can get the podcast right after 10 o'clock every single weekday morning. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to Friday. Deanna, nice to see you again. It's just twice in a week, isn't it?
Twice in a week. Glutton for punishment.
I know. You must have enjoyed it so much on Monday, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So thank you very much for coming back. This assisted dying bill, we've not really talked about it much on this show for no particular reason. It's just that, you know, it came out of the blue. Nobody really expected it to happen. Kim Ledbetter, who's been sort of pushing for it, has been sort of roundly criticised for being a bit too enthusiastic about wanting to sort of kill off members of her family. What's your take on it?
So I should sort of loosely declare an interest. I'm actually working with a not-for-profit at the moment who are in favour of the assisted dying bill.
Okay.
Personally, I'm in favour of assisted dying. Right. I think, you know, you may not wish to take the choice, but I think it should be an individual's choice. Yes. And the bill is very narrow. That's a really important point to make here. You have to have been diagnosed with a terminal illness and given less than 6 months to live. Right. So this is not for healthy people, this is people who are dying anyway. Right. And it's giving them control over their own death, which I think is really, really important. You know, they're a complete opt-out, so if you've got disabilities, there are additional protections. Things like Alzheimer's, if you could not give a proper informed consent, you wouldn't be allowed to access this. It's a very, very narrow in scope bill, and I think it's the right one, personally.
Yeah,
but
listen, I mean,
as you say, it's a really personal thing.
I mean, my argument about it is that should there be legislation made, is it necessary to make legislation for it? And I know that, you know, we've covered stories in the past where people have gone to Dignitas and they've taken their relatives there, and then they face a sort of police inquiry and they've had to go through this horrible rigmarole of being questioned by the cops and all that. But I think I'm right in saying I don't think anyone's ever been actually prosecuted, have they, for being involved in the assisted dying of their loved one, even if it was in Switzerland or somewhere else, you know?
Not to my knowledge, but I suppose the point is, if you're already going through the absolute heartbreak of your loved one getting something really grisly, they're really suffering at the end of their life, perhaps unexpectedly with a kind of last-minute terminal diagnosis, which does happen. Yeah. We have a case, a brilliant guy called Dan Tuckley, who was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, having gone to the doctors thinking he'd got a gym injury, given, I think, 2 months to live. And sadly, you know, passed away not long after, managed to get himself to Switzerland because his view was, I want to beat cancer. I don't want cancer to beat me. Took his family, they got back, were criminally investigated. So you're going through this heartbreak and this grief anyway. To then have the police knock on your door, perhaps drag you down to a station. We had one case where someone got a knock on the door at 5 in the morning. Woken up by the police, obviously already grieving, had to go through that process. We're under investigation for 6 months, 6 months of their life where they could have
Which I'm sure is horrible, could
have been facing a prison sentence. So I do think that this legislation is really necessary. If we're going to, you know, and it's for Parliament, this is a democracy, it's for Parliament to decide what happens. But if there is to be a concession that assisted dying should be available to people in this country, regardless of prosecutions, the law has to reflect that and mean that relatives are protected. And of course, it goes further than just an investigation, because while that's going on, you can't inherit. So if you're the wife and you took your husband to Dignitas, you could be blocked from inheriting the house, any assets he had. That's not what it's about. But if that's your bridge gap, you know, it's just another layer of
But again, as I
really
said, and as horrible as that is, and I don't doubt that it's really horrible, and I don't doubt that it's ridiculously, you know, long and drawn out as well. I wonder the other side of it, which is what Robert Jenrick's arguing. He says he's doing this for his nana Dorothy, who he says as a teenage boy he remembers how she continued to bring joy to the family as she defied a terminal diagnosis for nearly a decade. So there's that side of it as well, where people say, well, you know, you might feel like you want to die and you might feel like you want to end it all, because I can't imagine what it must be like to be diagnosed with a terminal illness, and you must, I'm sure, go through all sorts of horrible, you know, bouts of depression and all the rest of it, when in fact it might be that you could live for quite a considerable number of years despite that, because doctors don't always get it right.
You're right. The thing is, just because you go through the process of applying for an assisted death, you don't have to go through with it. A lot of people don't. A lot of people have huge peace of mind in knowing they will have that option if things get really, really bad. So they will apply, have the kind of ticket ready to go, and then never actually use it, because they realise they can actually live a really fulfilled life in those final days, or they use it right at the very, very end when they know there is no coming back. It's having that choice, I think, is really important. And
MPs are voting on it, I think, today, right? So what's the latest on the count, if you like? Because it started off, I think a lot of people watched the initial debate and were slightly kind of put off by the fact that when it looked like it was going to go through the first reading, there was a lot of sort of jubilation from Kim Ledbetter and some of her fellow MPs, and people thought that was sort of slightly in poor taste, and it kind of turned a lot of people off, and they kind of went, you shouldn't be that enthusiastic about killing people, you know. And yesterday Stephen Glover wrote a piece in the Mail which kind of connected the abortion bill and this, and said, you know, the left is very, very keen to basically kill people off. You know, what are they doing? And I know that's a bit of sort of hyperbole. However, so what's the likelihood today? What from the side of those who are that you're representing? You know, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'll first push back a bit on that hyperbole, because you should think this is actually the ultimate. You know, if you're a conservative with values that believe in personal freedom and personal choice, both of these things are ultimately about choice and giving people the choice of what they do with their own lives and their own bodies. That's the approach that I come at issues like this from. What are the numbers looking like? We will see today. There have been a number of people switching in both directions. We're obviously, as you'd expect, we've got a spreadsheet keeping a track on everything. My suspicion is that the bill will pass. There'll be a smaller majority than certainly what we would have hoped for, and a smaller majority than last time, but ultimately I think still there are more MPs in favour of it. Don't quote me on this, but if I was to put a very small bet
because
on,
the
I would
last
be putting
time
a bet in favour.
it kind of came up and it was on the front pages a few weeks ago, it was looking like the support for it was kind of drifting away slightly, and so people were considering that it might not go through. But I guess we'll wait and see what happens.
Wait and see. Probably about 2 o'clock this afternoon, I'd say.
OK, well, we'll bring that to you live here, of course, right here on Talk, as ever. Front page of the Sun this morning. Trump, you've got 2 weeks. Iran, which is the big story, I suppose, for the international watchers of what's going on. I'm sure that whatever Trump decides to do, if he does decide to do something, will happen like sooner than that. I think this weekend might be when something happens.
We'll see. I mean, it's quite a smart card because the US is a huge player in any of these sort of international conflicts. We know that, and Trump being the sort of power player that he is, where he could just make a decision in a heartbeat. Right. That can be enough to spur on action. So I think him saying 2 weeks...
he could literally wake up, even now as we speak. He's probably still up, actually, because he used to wake up till like 3 in the morning, didn't he? It's 1 o'clock in the morning in Washington, DC. He could just suddenly go, let's do it now. Yeah, and he'll be on Truth Social letting us all know in real time what's happening, which is fascinating, seeing sort of global diplomacy play out in real time on social media. I think this is actually, it seems to me, relatively smart in that it allows a small window for hopefully some kind of negotiation and de-escalation of this, which is, I think, what we all want and need to see. The last thing we need is the Middle East, which has always been a bit of a tinderbox, absolutely going up in flames. I think that's right, but I think a lot of people also want to see Iran being somewhat neutered so that they cannot continue to support Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis, which does damage to everybody in the region, and which, to be honest, everybody in the region wants to see an end to, including the Saudis, including the UAE, and of course including Israel. And when you're in breach of non-proliferation rules and the International Atomic Energy Agency calls you out for that, that's a big deal. That's a very, very big deal. That obviously should give all of us cause for concern in a regime like Iran. And it's funny, isn't it, that the people on the left who don't like Israel very much, who always refer to the UN and say, well, the UN say that they may be involved in war crimes. The UN says that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing in Gaza. When the UN says that Iran has broken the rules of their nuclear proliferation treaty, they go very quiet, and they don't say, well, the UN says Iran's broken the treaty. They haven't said that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's worrying. It's really, really worrying. And time will tell what Donald Trump actually does. And as you say, he can make some unexpected last-minute decisions. He can, which make him the ultimate power player in global geopolitics, really. But sincerely, I do hope we can just bring the heat down. Well, we'll see. Let's get a couple of clips. Caroline Leavitt, who's one of my favourite women in the entire world, White House press secretary. Here's what she had to say yesterday on the Iranian scenario. Now, regarding the ongoing situation in Iran, I know there has been a lot of speculation amongst all of you in the media regarding the president's decision-making and whether or not the United States will be directly involved. In light of that news, I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today. I'll make my decision. I mean, he's within the next 2 weeks. Within the next 2 weeks, yeah. I mean, so it could be any time, really. And he's giving them the chance, I suppose, to actually do. But the rhetoric coming from Iran is also pretty hard line, isn't it? They're saying, we will, take on the great Satan, little Satan, and every other Satan, and they'll come and start attacking Britain. They'll start attacking America. So I mean, obviously it's tense and it's difficult, but I think he'll sort it out and he'll win it. The other story on the front page of the Sun this morning is all about BBC Breakfast, which broke. I think a bit. I don't think it was going on Monday when you were here last. No, I don't think so. But it broke since then. The Sun have been all over this. Clemmy Moody broke it, saying that there's daggers drawn between these people, and we were laughing here because we all get on so well on this breakfast show that it's hard to imagine what it must be like trying to do, because it's hard enough when you go to work and there's something horrible going on and there's somebody bullying you or somebody's like being nasty to somebody else, but it sounds like a right nest of vipers. And really this morning we're being told that Naga Munchetti was reprimanded by bosses over 2 incidents in 3 years, including allegations she bullied a junior staffer. Meanwhile, the editor, a guy called Richard Frediani, has now taken leave because he's been accused of bullying, and apparently she and Charlie State, who sit next to each other on the sofa, don't speak to each other. I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it? That you find baffling, because on air they do seem to have pretty good rapport. Yeah. So fantastic acting, if that's the case. It shows you what BS that whole sort of mainstream media thing is, doesn't it? Totally. I mean, so many of us have worked in work environments that have been pretty toxic in one way or another. So I think, in a way, we can all relate. The difference is most of you don't have your face plastered across television live in real time.
You're not having to get on with the guy next to you who you don't get on with at all and pretend that you get on with him.
Yeah. The thing about this story that's kind of annoyed me the most is, again, we've just been talking about genuine global instability and nuclear threats.
Yes.
And yet this is the front page, about some TV presenters.
Right.
Not to undermine if bullying has been going on, how awful that must have been for the individuals involved, but I do think there's a level of perspective that's needed here.
Well, there is a piece on the top underneath the masthead. I mean, that's what tabloid newspapers do, though. I mean, I've worked in them for for many years, 25, 30 years, and people always said, the great thing about tabloids is that you can actually tell a story in 4 paragraphs. And there was a famous experiment that was done where they took the sub-editors from the Sun and put them into the Times, and they took the Times sub-editors and put them into the Sun. And the guys at the Times couldn't do the job at the Sun because you can't take a story that long and make it like that. It's quite a hard thing to do.
I can believe it, actually.
But apparently she's also accused of making a remark when she was on Radio 5 Live. They don't say what the remark was. Reprimanded by a senior producer. Somebody says that it was very inappropriate, slang term for a sex act. I mean, you just wonder what people are thinking, don't you? I mean, it's like, for heaven's sake, you're working in an environment involving, like, grown-up human beings. Just try and act like one.
And there's a difference between office banter, which we can all indulge in from time to time, also knowing your audience, and also
I think also if you know people, right? You and I know each other quite well. If I said something to you, before we came in, because we know each other.
I'd get you cancelled completely.
You'd probably get me. No, of course. You know what I mean? But if I said something to somebody who had literally just started working on day one, who I didn't know, which was possibly a bit inappropriate, I just wouldn't do it.
And there's also the power imbalance element to this as well. I think it says it was a junior staff member that this had been said to.
Yes.
That power imbalance in any workplace can be a dangerous thing, and people just need to be completely aware, socially aware.
Absolutely. We've got loads more to do. Deanna Davidson's here, former Tory MP, of course. We're going to look at the latest Keir Starmer video. He went to visit some poor woman yesterday who's a single mother of 3 to tell her all about how he was going to help her out with her heating bills, and we'll get to the bottom of that as well. Sean in Gloucester says, whether you agree with the assisted dying bill or not, one thing is for certain: as soon as politicians get anywhere near it, they will make a complete mess of it, and it won't be any use to man or beast. Well, there you are. That's the man of the people speaking. 90 minutes past 6, back after this.
You can't help it, right? Because I'm looking at that image, and through my mind, I'm playing the kind of Benny Hill theme.
But yeah, I know.
Because I know that the ridiculous cops are just out of the picture, and it's hilarious, you know.
Yeah, well, so what happened? This is the scene with our crutch guy. This is unfolded yesterday morning. He'd apparently previously tried to get on a boat the day before, but, you know, his disability got the best of him and he just couldn't quite make it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:21. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Stuart in Perthshire says, there goes the future president, leave it. I sadly won't be around to see it, but I bet my bank balance on her being POTUS, P-O-T-U-S, President of the United States of America. I mean, she is very, very impressive, isn't she?
Very impressive.
I mean, since the moment she kind of stepped onto the big stage as being the White House press secretary, I know that she's been in quite high-profile jobs before, so it's not like she suddenly came from nowhere, but it feels like she came from nowhere. But she is, I don't think I've ever seen anyone as a kind of a representative of any government on top of her game. I mean, she knows everything. She answers every question. She fires people. She fires things off. She bans people from the White House press room. She's brilliant.
She's in control, and she's so young, which, you know, I know is one of those glib comments that's made, but as a young woman who kind of rose in a very different sphere, I know how much additional pressure you have. And some of the comments that have been said about her have been absolutely atrocious, so much kind of misogyny and what have you. But I do think she's a very, very impressive communicator and a really smart appointment. Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a look at Trump, actually, because here he is talking about Vladimir Putin and Iran last night.
Russia, Ukraine is so stupid. Would have never happened if I was president. You guys agree with that, right? Would have never happened if I was president. Putin would have never done it. And I spoke to him yesterday, and I said, you know, he actually offered to help mediate. I said, do me a favor. Mediate your own. Let's mediate Russia first, okay? I said, Vladimir, let's mediate Russia first. You can worry about this later. But I think that's going to work out too, but it's so many people have been killed. The big thing with that one is far more people are dead than have been reported in the Ukraine, Russia. Many, many more people.
It's pretty ironic, isn't it? Vladimir Putin's offering to mediate between Iran and Israel. Meanwhile, he's blowing the hell out of Ukraine. Brilliant irony. Absolutely bizarre. Let's get a gaff, because it is Friday and we've had a quite difficult and hard week. So occasionally what we do is we try and cheer everybody up with one or two mistakes that happen on live broadcast, which is what we do. Here's Kevin O'Sullivan.
The Prime Minister Keir Starmer has issued a statement, so let's have a listen to that.
To British shores.
Well, the images and news from India is absolutely devastating, and I speak for the entire country in saying our thoughts are with each and every one of those involved, to all the British and Indian families across the land who are absolutely impacted.
For those of you who are listening to this rather than watching, what happens is that they don't take the camera off Kevin. He thinks the camera's not on him, and he just starts swearing and shouting at his producer. I mean, I did say it was all sweet as a light ear. Not on every show, it has to be said. Good morning, Mike, says Rachel. I hope and pray your guest Deanna is wrong regarding the bill. If this bill passes, old vulnerable people feeling a burden on their families may opt to die. There's that aspect of it as well, isn't there, that people might feel because they are a burden, because they don't want to be a burden, that they might be feeling sort of more pressured into doing something. What do you say to them? Well, there's a lot of protections built into the bill, including, you know, you have to have 2 consultations with doctors, you have to sign it off. There's then a panel aspect where there will be a social worker and a legal expert, a judge on that panel, because social workers are really, really adept at finding any level of coercion, which is really, really important. We don't want... Everyone has to be of sound mind and want to do this in order to be able to access it. And actually, when you look at evidence from around the world, because we're not pioneers in this space, it happens all over the world. You look at, you know, the likes of Canada, Switzerland, the Netherlands. Australia is probably the closest to the method that's being proposed here in the UK. There's basically no evidence of detected coercion at all. And similarly, there's always these statistics posted say this many people say that they feel a burden. Well, when they're surveyed about their list of reasons for wanting to access an assisted death, the number 1 is usually concerns about dying in pain. Number 2 is usually loss of autonomy and wanting to live a good life and be able to take care of themselves. They're always the number 2 reasons. But similarly, I wouldn't want to be a burden on my family. No. I wouldn't, and I am free to make that rational choice as long as it is a rational choice and I'm not being coerced into it, would be my view. But again, it comes down to that personal freedom. Absolutely right. Let's talk about what's going on in the NHS, because we haven't talked about the NHS for a while, but today, on the front page of the Times, consultants are going to strike, making out that they're not making enough money. 120,000 a year they start on, right? This is before they even go into a bit of private practice here, there and everywhere. They want a 35% pay rise. What
I want a 35% pay rise. Everyone wants a 35% pay rise. But there's a level of reality, I think, that people need to consider here.
I mean, what do they want? A new Lamborghini as well, you know, for a signing-on bonus? I mean, it is ridiculous, isn't it? The BMA is already balancing its resident doctors, who are formerly known as junior doctors. I still call them junior doctors, apparently they don't like it. But basically, for 6 months of strike action is likely to run from July until January. The ballot closes on July the 7th. And you know they're going to do it. Consultants rewarded an above-inflation 4% pay increase in May for 25-26, but the BMA described this as an insult. So they now want 35% by 2027-28. Needs to restore consultant pay to 2008 levels in real terms. This is a thing that they try on all the time, don't they? They go, oh, we need it in line with inflation. So when inflation went mad up to sort of 10, 11%, they were like, oh, we need to have all this money. And when it went down, they didn't say, actually, now we don't need that.
Well, it's just now 35%, of course. I can't quite recall inflation being at 35%.
It never was. Well, but they argue all the time that, you know, they need to be restored to the level of 2008. And actually, if you look back on what they were paid in 2008, they were actually paid really, really well in 2008. And so, I mean, it looks a bit greedy, doesn't it?
It does, and I think it's that sort of element of fairness. I don't think anyone doubts that these guys are professionals in their field and work incredibly hard and have a really stressful job. Of course they do. But so do so many other people, particularly in the private sector, who wouldn't even dream of going to their line managers and saying, give us a 35% pay rise. Absolutely not. And so I think there is a level of kind of unfairness that people, particularly in the private sector, will be feeling when they look at things like this. Because, you know, consultants are incredibly well paid as it is. But what about bus drivers? What about taxi drivers? What about shop workers? They're also really hard workers. They deserve a fair deal too.
And they get paid a tiny pittance of what's comparable to these guys.
And it's their tax money that's paying for these consultants, which we need to remember. This is not public money, this is taxpayers' money.
And if you remember, when Labour got in the summer of last year, the first thing they did was to give £22 billion to the NHS, all of which was swallowed up by a pay rise for junior doctors. So and we knew this would happen. They're already going back for more because they know that they'll get it.
I think there's a sense of irony here as well that, you know, when the Conservatives were in power, Labour said, oh, it's chaos, there's all these strikes in the NHS, we'll put an end to this. But if they go on strike again, which I suspect may well happen, then what's the line?
Yeah, exactly right. Should we have a look at Keir Starmer's latest video? This was one that he put out yesterday. He went off somewhere up north. I'm not sure how far north he went. I don't know exactly. I think it was somewhere in the Midlands, maybe. He's got this warm homes discount gimmick going on, right? The warm home discount, by the way, is not, in fact, the government giving people money. What it is, what happens is the suppliers of the energy will come to the DWP and they'll say, who of these people actually, actually needs this warm homes discount, and they go, oh, this person, that person, that person, and then what they do is they up everybody else's bill to pay for those people's bills, which means that basically the rest of us are paying for people who are being subsidised, which is hardly the government giving money away. But have a look at this.
Nicola, nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah.
We've got this really, what I think is a fantastic announcement today, which is the extension of the warm homes discount to another nearly 3 million people. So that'd be 6 million in all, £150 off the bill.
Yeah, so it will make a massive difference to me. So through the winter months, obviously, like most people, it's the most difficult with some electric. I've got a smart meter. I also have an app on the phone. So
this is your smart meter, right? Okay, look at this. And so this 150 will make a big difference.
You know, sort of £30 or £40 a month, really, that's going to be massive.
So which bit was Imogen doing? She was helping you tidy up?
Oh, yeah, and we even got soapy water and we were scrubbing all...
No.
Yeah, we did. I was really pleased for the opportunity to be able to talk to him, and the reason, obviously, for the visit today was to come out and speak to just normal, everyday people, and I'm one of those. So I'm a working parent, 3 children, I work in education. He just seemed really personable. He listened. So I think it's great that that's going to be available for people no matter what.
Now, you've been in politics quite a long time. Is she a representative of the ordinary working people of this country? She works in education. She's a single mother of 3. They would have vetted the hell out of her, won't they? Because it wasn't a surprise that they suddenly turned up at her door.
I don't know her background, I don't know her story, but these things are always pre-set up, not least because security need to go in advance and make sure the place is safe and there's not going to be an ambush and stuff. So it will have been very, very sort of carefully sanitised, and every party does this. Every single party
but she'll be some kind of activist, no doubt. I mean, I'm sorry to be so cynical about it, but she won't be being just a normal person that they've suddenly plucked out of nowhere and gone, would you like the Prime Minister to come and see you? Because most people in this country would go, no, actually I don't want to see him because I'm not sure what I'm going to do if he walks through my door, because he talks about having a smart meter there.
It looks like he's never seen a smart meter before.
Oh, we've never seen a smart meter before. How about a smart Prime Minister? That'd be good, wouldn't it? For heaven's sake. Anyway, listen, we'll come back with that. 6:31.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:32. I'm Mike Graham, and of course we are here all the way through until 10 o'clock. Dina Davis is here. Once again, very good morning to you. Martin from Langdon Hills, I don't know where that is, says, Starmer always bangs on about how they're putting money into the pockets of working people, and yet he never mentions putting free money, phones, food, accommodation, flight, driving lessons and trips to the zoo once a month to the non-working people who have come here illegally. Well, we've got a great story on that front, actually, which we're going to tell you about in a minute. But first, how about a voice note from Richard?
Morning, Mike. Richard in Corby. I was watching a show about this assisted dying bill in Canada, and the trouble is they start with a narrow scope, and when they've got the power, then they widen the scope, and like for depression and things like that. That's the problem. If you give them the power, they then widen it and start using it where they shouldn't, and that worries me. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Richard. Is that a problem? Is that an issue?
The vast majority of jurisdictions don't significantly widen any of their criteria. There might be tweaks, but the point is, if there was to be any widening, Parliament would have to vote on it. It would be done democratically. It couldn't just be done in the background.
Because I'm sure I've read stuff about how that happened in the Netherlands, and then they started off just with the kind of, you know, you have to be terminally ill, but then it kind of slightly moved to you could just want to do it.
But if that's a democratic decision that's taken, that's a democratic decision that's taken. But the point is, in the vast majority of jurisdictions, that hasn't been the case.
Yeah.
There's a narrow scope and it remains that narrow.
But when you say a democratic decision is taken, I mean, that means that people who have elected various members of Parliament who have taken that decision. You know, is that, I know I'm just going to sound really stupid now, but is that democratic properly? I mean, should something like this not have a referendum?
In the system that we're in, that's how our democracy works, right? You play to the hand that you're given. A referendum, I don't know, I mean, referendums are so divisive is one of the problems that we've seen in past years. And
but I think
you either believe in parliamentary democracy or you don't.
Well, I think a lot of people don't now because they've seen what happened. They saw that they had a referendum in 2016. They voted to leave the European Union, and all that happened after that was that Parliament and parliamentarians spent a great deal of time and many years, and they're still doing it, trying to stop it from happening. You know, so they see that.
It was so frustrating.
Yeah,
as someone who at that point was politically engaged, wanted to stand and stood for the Conservative Party, wanted to be an MP, to see the will of the people pushed back on. In that regard, was so frustrating.
It was.
And it's no wonder people are frustrated with the system.
That's what I mean. So, I remember in 2019 going down to Parliament every single day, sitting on College Green in a tent of shame, as we used to call it, one politician after another coming in, arguing the toss about whether it was a right thing to do or whether they needed to tweak this or whether they needed to go to Brussels and tweak that. And, I mean, it was obfuscation of the highest order. And even now, we've got Keir Starmer, a politician who wanted to have a second referendum when he was in charge of the Brexit quota, and he's still doing it. You know, he wants to have a closer relationship with the European Union than people voted to have. So when we talk about democracy, I mean, I think that's where people have lost faith in the system, you know?
Understandably. I suppose one of my questions, and I'd throw this out to your viewers and listeners, is how, as someone who was a politician, not anymore, how do politicians get that back? Because it's easy to say, do the things that you say, but it's a broader piece than that.
It is.
How can politicians win back your trust? Honestly, if people can write in, I honestly want to hear ideas.
I don't know if anybody that's going to answer that question on this show anyway will actually have an answer for that, because I don't think it can be done. A lot of people are going to Reform as a result of that, because they see Reform as not like a real political party. They see it as a completely different sort of movement, as was witnessed, funnily enough, by David Bull, when David Bull went on Good Morning Britain, and he started telling stories about when he was in charge of the Ghost Hunter show. And, you know, in most political worlds, that interview would have killed him off, because he started talking about ghosts jumping at him.
It was an entertaining one.
But it was fascinating. And there he was talking about, you know, a presence in the car, you know, going to see, what's his name, Derek Akora. You know, Derek Akora said, "You haven't come alone." And then he jumped on me and tried to strangle me. And we were watching it here kind of with incredulity, going, crikey. But of course, all the Reform guys that I'd met subsequently have said, actually, we thought that was great, because it shows him to be an ordinary person. And in fact, probably a lot more people believe in ghosts than believe in the Conservative Party. Probably. You know what I mean? And that's where we are. Lady in the Keir Starmer video can't add up. £150 a year is not £30 or £40 a month. It's £12.50. Says Simon in Brentwood. Very good. Let's talk about Lost and Hound. Front page, not front page, page 19 of The Sun. This guy, I think we should, he's the one migrant that I've seen coming across the channel that I think we should definitely keep, because he's obviously got a couple of brains about him and some cojones. A migrant and his dog, who spent 3 days adrift in a dinghy after its motor failed, is rescued in the Channel. He's from Afghanistan. He gave his name as Barry and claimed he found Lancashire healer Bella in a French refugee camp. She's the 6th pooch plucked from an illegal boat. He's a guy who's just found his own dinghy and basically come on his own. He's a sort of DIY migrant.
There's a level of entrepreneurial spirit here.
There is.
As a Yorkshire lass who's always looking to find a decent bargain, doing it yourself rather than paying
$2 grand or $4 grand. Yeah.
It's a level of entrepreneurial spirit. I'll be interested to see, you know, if this guy stays, like what he does next.
Yeah, right. But he's definitely not called Barry, is he?
Probably not.
I mean,
called Barry.
How many people in Afghanistan and they go, "Oh, we have this beautiful son. What's his name? Barry."
Well, here's one for you, Mike. If you could pick a new name, what would you pick?
A new name.
A new name.
Wow. I don't know. I like my name. I don't want to call myself anything else.
You want to stick with Mike?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't want to call myself Barry. Definitely not Barry.
Well, when you had the trauma like me of a name like Deanna, which is ridiculous. Sorry, Mum, I know you're watching, but it's a bit of a silly name. And you know when you go to like...
It's quite a nice name, I think.
like it.
I have grown... got a mellifluous sound to it.
I've grown to love it. But when I was a kid, you know, there's all those personalised like little trinkets. You obviously, Deanna was never on it, and I always felt aggrieved. So as a kid, I was like, I wish I was just called Rebecca.
Well, you know, my sort of, you know, people think it's an insult when they decide to have a go at me on Twitter. My actual real first name is Archibald, because it was my father's name and his father's name, and it was like the sort of traditional firstborn son of the firstborn son's name. But because my mother was sensible, she was like, we're not calling him that. It will go with the second name, Michael. So I've always been known as Michael.
But Archie's very trendy
now. But now
it's
trendy, yeah. But not when in the 1960s when I was going to primary school in Marylebone, you didn't want to be called Archie because you basically got the hell kicked out of you every day. But it's caused me so many problems because of course it's my name on my passport, but it's not the name on my bank account. It's the name on some bills but not others, and I've had this kind of dual, you know, problem with my credit rating ever since. So thanks, Mum. You know. Unfortunately, she died. She didn't quite reach 100. She died just 3 months short of that. But anyway, there we are. 6:39. Lots more to talk about, including an amazing story about BA staff who were on a flight somewhere and got accidentally booked into a sex dungeon. It's great. It's very funny. It'll cheer you up on a Friday. This is Talk.
They've come into university thinking that the most appropriate way to deal with people that they disagree with is to silence their views, and this attitude of students is really quite shocking. They think that they have the right to not encounter anything that they find offensive or unsettling, which is great, which is why it's great that Arif Ahmed has proposed that
Arif Ahmed, he's the head of the Office for Students,
who has proposed that they have these sort of inductions to practice being shocked by opinions.
Terrifying?
It is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:42. By the way, just in case you didn't understand what was going on with that Keir Starmer clip, you know, he's going to give out this warm homes discount. This is Catherine Porter, who's a regular guest on this show, who knows an awful lot about the way energy works, and she says this is how it works. Step 1, the supplier asks the Department of Work and Pensions which of its customers is eligible. Step 2, the supplier calculates the cost of giving these customers the warm homes discount. And then step 3, the supplier charges all the non-eligible customers extra to cover the cost calculated in step 2. How is this putting people first? It's a good point. It's more smoke and mirrors from this government, isn't it? This from Ellie, who says, Mike, I'm not young. I pray the assisted dying bill goes through. I thought your young lady guest summed it up perfectly. To use family coercion as a reason not to is ridiculous. How dare a politician take away my decision to have a good death if it's what I want? Seeing both my parents beg me for help in the end and seeing how that end actually was is not something I want to go through. So, you know, somebody who agrees with your point. Young lady guest, there you go. You won't be getting that for much longer, will you? What should we do now? Oh, I know. Let's do this. This is your Captain's Spanking, one of the great headlines in The Sun this morning. British Airways crew were mistakenly booked into a sex dungeon and got no sleep owing to moans and groans from a 24-hour orgy. This is sort of your worst nightmare, isn't it? Apparently they were going to Milan and their bosses booked the team into the Hotel Mo.om, M-O.O.M, in the Italian city of Milan, but they confused it with the nearby M.O.O.M hotel. So the motel and the hotel, I guess, is a different thing. That's just bad. Have you ever stayed in any weird places in your...
Not in a sex dungeon, I haven't.
In a sex dungeon,
some slightly iffy Airbnbs, but nothing of this order.
Yeah.
You said it's your worst nightmare. I think there'd be some people who quite enjoy that.
Yeah, but not if you're not prepared. I mean, it's one thing if you want to go there, but if you've just got off a long flight and you just go, I just want to put my head down and get some sleep, and there's, you know, a lot of banging going on. You don't really want any of that. Now, I once, in the early days of me working at talkSPORT, I used to live in Scotland. I used to have to come down and do shows and then sort of go back. And sometimes what I would do is, if I was coming down, I'd come down on the sleeper or something like that, so I wouldn't have to spend the night somewhere down here. But then, you know, I did an overnight show, and they asked me if I could stay and do the evening show, like later on, like a 10 o'clock show that night. And so instead of going home, I had to go and find a hotel. And I didn't really have any money. And I ended up finding a place somewhere near the UCL, sort of around the back of Euston. And it was like a bed and breakfast. But it wasn't. But I couldn't get the room until sort of 2 o'clock. So I finished the show at 6, 7 in the morning, and I had to sort of move from park bench to park bench, trying to waste hours and hours and hours before I could go. And then when I finally got the room, I was so tired. It was like a single bed in a basement. And, you know, it was one of those, you know, if you're looking down from the street, you know, you've got the railings, and all I could see was railings, and it was a shared bathroom. It was just horrendous, awful. I think I'd rather have had a sex dungeon.
I was about to say, but I imagine a sex dungeon you can book by the hour as well, so you'd have probably been a bit better in there. Yeah.
But it is. I mean, it's one of those things, and I don't know if it's still the case. I'm sure it is for a lot of people. If you know, sort of arrive in a place at 9 in the morning, but you can't check into a hotel until 2 or sometimes 3. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't claim to know how a hotel sort of business model works, but you would think they could hold a couple of rooms. Yeah. Just in case.
Just to sort of like a day room or something, just somewhere you can go. I mean, I remember I used to go through Schiphol Airport quite a bit, and they've got a hotel which is actually not a sex hotel, but you can rent it by the hour because they know that people are coming, kind of going, you know, in transit through the airport.
My favourite one as well is when you have to check out early and your flight isn't until the evening.
Yeah.
I have been in a couple of hotels that charge you to store bags now.
Really?
Yeah, which is terrible.
That is ridiculous. absolutely ridiculous. Story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today saying the cost of a new passport, if you are travelling, could rise by £32. It's already pretty expensive. They're saying the Passport Office had a budget shortfall of 223 million last year and a total deficit of 916 million. I don't know how, if you're producing passports, you lose money. How do you do that? Because I think the last passport I got cost about 120 quid, you know?
I guess administration costs, but the 32 quid increase, what's that's going to be about 30% or something along those lines? That's huge.
Yeah, it's huge. But also, as I say, how can they lose money? I mean, I've been to the Passport Office. They've got, I don't know, 4 booths open or something with 4 people working there. And I know they've got more than, you know, they've got one in Glasgow. They've got them all over the country. But I really don't see how, adults must currently pay £94.50 for a new passport, while a one-day renewal costs 222 quid. That's the highest. That's the sort of fast track.
But also, they've made it easy. You can upload your own picture now, so surely there's even less manual labour that goes into the process for a lot of people.
You would think, yeah. Budget shortfall of 340 million across all services it looked at, with the Passport Office accounting for the lion's share. I remember during COVID, this was one of the sort of the turning points of working from home, wasn't it? Because they found out that the woman who was running the Passport Office had actually never been to the Passport Office, and she was working from home in Leicester or something. Absolutely ridiculous.
Kind of iconic on her behalf, but similarly pretty terrible for the actual service itself.
Yeah, absolutely right. Coming up, we're going to come back to you with a story that we struck on yesterday, which is a lot of British people stuck in Israel because they went there either on holiday or went there to do a bit of work, went there to go to weddings, etc. The Foreign Office seems to be reluctant to help them to leave. And the best advice they've got so far is to try and make their own way to the Egyptian border. So we'll bring you that coming up after this. Oh, there isn't a break. Why is there no break? Have we done them all? OK, well, let's have the video then.
The Foreign Office just embarrasses itself compared to other countries. The plan is absolutely ludicrous. So what they're now telling us is, or suggesting, that you can make your way to the Egyptian border or the Jordanian border to find your way out. To get to the Egyptian border, that's a 5-hour, partially dirt track trek through the desert to the south, to an unfriendly country with no protection, no shelters along the way. What are you supposed to do? You know, hide in a sand dune if there's a rocket attack. And by the way, it completely goes against local guidance. Local guidance is to stay close to a shelter. David Lammy, I'd say quite frankly, absolutely lied to my face. I posted online myself about how he absolutely stands with Israel, and we are with you and we're behind you. And to be honest with you, throughout this war, he's paid nothing but lip service, and to be frank, been an absolute embarrassment to our country. Now that we have British citizens that are caught up in this, the ability of the Foreign Office and himself is quite frankly shambolic. But I do want to say one thing, that this proves one thing without shadow of a doubt, that Israel is absolutely right to go into Iran. These are ballistic missiles. Thank God for the Iron Dome. Millions of people would be harmed, if not killed.
And today the story remains the same, basically. The Foreign Office, who basically issued a statement yesterday and said, look, we don't have a responsibility to look after people who travel abroad, which I get. But this is a sort of slightly separate situation,
well,
isn't it?
It's not that they don't have a responsibility to look after people travelling abroad. It's when people travel abroad against travel advice.
Right.
The Foreign Office will issue travel advice saying don't travel to a particular nation. If you go against that, if the Foreign Office is saying it isn't safe, should the taxpayer pick up the responsibility of then getting you home when arguably you've been a bit silly?
Yes.
And going somewhere that's dangerous?
But I think the problem here is that I don't know what the Foreign Office advice is right now. I think it is not to travel to Israel.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it was that necessarily 2 weeks ago. You know, so if they brought it in since people have travelled, you can't really blame the people who travelled there and said, you know, now they'd quite like to get out.
No.
And it seems a bit odd to give them advice to say, get yourself to the Egyptian border, you know, by whichever means you can do it. I mean, as this guy we spoke to yesterday, Max Radford said, he said, you've got to cross desert, you know, it's mostly a dirt track, and when you get to the border, you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And certainly, you know, Cyprus, and the thing is, the Americans are airlifting people out, but we're not. And I think that looks bad for us.
Potentially. I mean, I think, you know, key thing, don't travel against foreign travel advice.
Yeah.
And if you are somewhere and the travel advice changes, because it's always publicised, get yourself out as quickly as you can before it becomes a problem. I think when you wait and hope a situation changes, that's when it can get pretty dangerous and pretty ropey. And don't get me wrong, I feel for all the individuals who are stuck there, who are probably genuinely really worried right now. It must be really, really difficult emotionally, worried about your own safety and getting home.
And also,
family,
they're worried anyway, because a lot of them are there visiting their families, and a lot of them are there like going for weddings and things like that, or visiting their kids. So, you know, it's a pretty ropey situation. And if there is going to be some kind of activity involving the US bombing Iran, you know, how much worse is it going to get, and at what point? Because I think there's the other side of it is at some point the government will have to say, well, now we have to go and get them, because it's actually that dangerous. Because I think the government would feel, and rightly, would be criticised very heavily if Iran started really, you know, pummeling Israel, and we had British citizens there that could have been rescued before it happened. I don't know. I think they would look bad.
Potentially, but you know, get yourself out is the key thing. Get yourself out if you can, and I'm sure the Foreign Office will review the guidance, kind of what action they're taking.
Well, I think they should. I think they need to. Scott in Dorset says, Deanna asked, how can we trust politicians again? Let's start with answering the questions asked. Stop lying constantly and stop gaslighting the country. We're not as stupid as you think we are. Not all politicians, obviously, but the ones at the top treat us like idiots. And I think there's very much a sense of that from the Labour government right now, because they keep issuing these, you know, ridiculous videos, and they keep saying these things whenever they're interviewed, you know, that our plan is working, and, you know, the economy is recovering, and, you know, people are feeling better off, and people know that none of that is true. And I think that's a big part of it.
I do feel like we are living in an age now where political spin just doesn't wash.
No.
With most people, you know, back in the sort of 90s, early noughties, spin doctors were incredible and really sort of helped to shift the narrative. I think people see right through it now.
Yeah, they do.
Politicians are too polished and evade answers. A lot of people lose respect for them and don't think it's authentic. And it's difficult. I mean, as a politician, I've been there. You don't want it, when you ask a yes or no question, people will scream at the TV and say, just answer the question. But if you say yes, and then leave hostage to fortune because something changes later. And sometimes issues are not black and white. Right. Sometimes issues, there's a whole shade of grey in the middle, and you can't answer yes or no.
No, I get that.
It's really, really difficult.
But again, I think people, and I mean, when you were a politician, I think you were one of those that did actually answer questions.
I always tried to.
As honestly as you could. And I get the fact that there's a nuance, and I get the fact that you can't always just say yes or no. But often the politicians nowadays, particularly the Labour government right now, just don't answer the question. They answer a different question. You know, and I've seen it before, and I've had Tories as well that do the same. And you ask them a question, and they answer a completely different question. You know, and like if you are, I mean, you could almost, you know, do I used to do an imitation of Starmer. You know, why don't you give up on net zero? Well, I've always said that, you know, the greatest thing that we should do in this country is to protect the security of our energy production. And you go, well, that's not what I asked you. You know, would you mind answering the question? Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Just in answer to the question, what can be done to increase public trust in politics? I think they need to be held to account on the manifestos. There needs to be a law that they have to implement what was in the manifestos. And if they want to implement something significant that wasn't in their manifesto before they were elected, then there's got to be a referendum on it. Labour said nothing, as far as I can remember, about this assisted dying bill before they were elected. They said nothing about implementing legalisation of abortion right up to full term. Nothing about giving away sovereignty of Gibraltar so that when you land, there's a Spanish Border Force official checks your passports. They didn't say anything about that. And they need to be held account. They need to be held to account on all that legally. That's the only way that you can increase trust in politicians.
See, I think, you know, Mark hits it right on the head there. He hits the nail on the head, because, you know, people who listen to this show and who watch this show, and people who leave me voice messages, they're very sophisticated politically. You know, they can see what's going on. They listen to this show. They know from a day-to-day basis what the government's up to. They know what they were told the government was going to do, and they know what they weren't told. And, you know, you can't just keep taking people for fools.
Well, I will take a conversation with was it Mark?
Mark.
Yeah, I would take a conversation with a Mark over a conversation with some pollster, spin doctor, party strategist any day.
Yeah.
Because people see what's going on the ground around them. Right. They remember things that they were told during elections. You can't get away with it as a politician.
I mean,
now,
did you find,
what I meant to say
when you were in Parliament, did you find that there was a sort of a cohort of people who didn't really engage with the public, or didn't really understand what the public thinks? Because that's the sense as well that we get a lot here, of people who say, you know, the politicians are out of touch, you know, they live in their little Westminster bubble, they don't really go and see. And I know a lot of them work hard, and a lot of them go to their constituents and all of that, but a lot of them seem to not really understand how the people feel.
I think to some extent, yeah, but I mean, you know, one argument is there are people of all shapes, sizes and stripes across the country.
Yeah.
So for every politician, there will be a sect of people that are like them and think like them and do like them. But I do think there has been a tendency to think that you are doing public engagement because you hold a surgery and you're talking to people in a very sanitised, controlled scenario. That is so different from going and sitting in the pub and listening to Dave sitting at the bar talking about what's happening in his workplace that week. I think those conversations, to me, were always far more valuable than any of the kind of set-piece, sanitised
because a lot of the surgery stuff, you get sort of campaigners coming to see you, don't you? You get people who've got a sort of an axe to grind about a particular issue.
Well, we used to try and filter those out, so it was just the people that really needed help on a particular issue at my surgeries, which I got some criticism for at the time for not engaging, but the point is, the surgery for me was about people who are in dire straits for one way or another, doing what I could to try and help unlock their situation. That's what I thought the purpose of a surgery was, not to listen to another campaign group talk about the latest bee in their bonnet. We can engage in different ways, and I might choose to meet them separately, but not in a surgery. But I do think there are a sect of politicians that are out of touch, and Westminster doesn't help. Westminster is so remote. The sort of parliamentary estate is really different and weird, and in some ways I really loved it.
It's like a little island,
like
isn't
home,
it?
but it is. And so my first year as an MP, I lived very close to Parliament, and as soon as my first sort of year's housing contract was up, I was like, I need to get out of here because I feel like I am working in the bubble, living in the bubble. All the shops I go to are in the bubble. I can't do this anymore. So I moved a lot further out into sort of real London when I was down in Westminster, and it made such a difference to me because I felt like I got separation, and I felt somehow just more in touch just from going to local shops, local pubs here, and obviously spending as much time in my constituency as I could, in the pubs, in the supermarkets, at the village fetes, talking to people properly, having proper conversations.
Absolutely. Well, as I say, I mean, most politicians, if they listen to the remarks that get made on this show, the messages that we get, that would give them a pretty good insight. Let's talk about this from Martin in Whitley Bay. He says, the woman on Starmer's Warmer Homes promo looks and behaves disturbingly like him. If you gave her a short back and sides, hair dye and a pair of free glasses from Lord Alley, it's him. Is it his sister? It's bizarre. And one from Glenn from Labour Leeds, he says, unfortunately, Sir Keith in Nicholas's house, don't suppose Nicola is a Labour supporter, just having a single red rose in a vase next to Sir Keith, which is the logo of the Labour Party. If we didn't know, what a coincidence. See, they don't miss a trick. You know, I didn't spot that until after he actually mentioned it. But yeah, there's a red rose in a vase, but I don't know if it's part of a group of roses. I just don't know. Morning, Mike. It is a national disgrace that so many people rely on a warm home discount, mainly due to government's harebrained energy policies. Keir, it is not something to be proud of, says Cliff in Berkshire. I mean, that's true. If Ed Miliband was doing his job properly, you wouldn't need to give people a winter homes discount because it wouldn't be cold. You'd be able to afford to actually pay for electricity.
Proper energy security, energy supply, energy storage, and we'd be able to get those bills right down in this country.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Let's see, what's this? Morning, Mike, although in a way I don't agree with the assisted dying, if I was an MP, I would vote for it because of the stringent protections. What a shame there are not these protections on newly created life, says Steve, the Cornish pirate. One final one. I mean, there's not really any time for you to answer this question, but Stephen Fry's had a go at J.K. Rowling. War of the Lovies.
I missed that one completely. Actually.
Apparently he's had a go at saying she's been radicalised by TERFs. I must admit, one of the great joys of my life is watching J.K. Rowling destroying people on Twitter. And I know you might have a view on it. I don't know what your view is, but Stephen Fry ought to sit down and shut up. I think generally is what I would say.
I will always love Harry Potter, even if I don't agree with some of what J.K. Rowling says. And you've got to separate the art from the artist, I think.
You have, absolutely right. Deanna, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Deanna Davison, you'll be back, I guess, at some point or other in the rest of the course of the year, now living abroad. Who can blame her? Coming up in the next hour, we'll talk some more about Miliband forced into a U-turn on oil and gas because apparently he's worked out that we can't actually sustain the country on sustainable energy. It doesn't work. Also, loads more to come. This is Talk. We'll see you in a minute.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Oh, no, I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question to I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Come on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, there's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. It's Friday, the 20th of June. It's hard to believe, right? But in about a week's time, and I know that I sometimes say these things and people go, what's wrong with him? And he's just got a calendar in front of him. Well, no, but in a week's time, in nearly July. And Wimbledon is going to be starting. You know, we're going to be getting into the sort of the summer season. Royal Ascot's already going on. The King's not done too well. His horses have not been performing particularly well. But of course, you know, the summer season is very much upon us. It's going to be a record temperatures at the weekend. It was 32 degrees yesterday in parts of London and the southeast. It's not always the same everywhere. We've got all sorts of reports coming in. One from Stuart in Perthshire who says, believe it or not, it's supposed to be 27 degrees here in Perthshire. Looks promising so far. So, you know, I might have to stop apologising for saying it's not actually going to be that nice up in Scotland, because maybe it is. Coming up in the show today, we're keeping an eye, of course, on everything that's going on in the Middle East. Trump steps back from the brink, is what it says on the front page of the Times. Trump will decide on Iran within weeks, says The Guardian. It looks as though Trump has basically given the Iranians a couple of weeks to see sense and to make sure that they don't do anything stupid. We'll keep you up to date with all of that. Meanwhile, Britain don't seem to know what to do. Keir Starmer has not really issued any information whatsoever about Iran or what Britain is going to do about it. What we do know is there are a load of British citizens who are stuck in Israel, and the Foreign Office seems to want to do very much about rescuing them and evacuating them and bringing them home, because all commercial flights in and out of Israel, of course, have been cancelled because it's a rather dangerous place right now. Deanna Davison said, well, if you go to a country where you're supposed to not go to and then you can't get out of it, then that's your own fault. Is that fair? Surely, to heavens, David Lammy should be speaking out about this, shouldn't he? And saying, if there are Brits stranded there, let's get a couple of Hercules transporters over from Cyprus and bring them all out. That seems to me to be the sensible thing to do. Also, we're going to talk about the NHS. Consultants want to go on strike. Apparently, they're not happy with their £120,000 a year salaries, and that's the starting minimum, by the way, before they even go and do private stuff. They want 35% pay rise, believe it or not. Absolutely and utterly unbelievable. The Bank of England has issued a warning to families to say that basically everything is going up. The price of energy is going up. The price of food is going up. So it's going to be a lot more expensive for you as a family to live throughout the course of the rest of the year. You you will notice the difference. I want to hear from you on all of that. The prices of everything are going up, and we just don't know when it's all going to stop. 0344 499 1000. Also, we're going to talk about migrants as well. There's an Albanian drug dealer who is now the migrant of the day. He can't be deported, even though he was pictured in front of £250,000 worth of loot that he'd made from his business. We'll tell you why. Also, there's one particular migrant who's now come across on his own dinghy. Is this going to be the way forward? He's not having to pay people traffickers. He doesn't have to part with 4,000 quid. He just got himself a dinghy, jumped in it, and put a dog in there with him as well, which he said he found on the north coast of France, and sailed to Britain on his own. And he's been picked up, and now he's here. He's from Afghanistan. Apparently he's called Barry. Seriously, I know that's not his real name. Does he have a passport? You know, can anybody tell us what he does, what he's done, where he's been, what he's doing here? No, of course not. It's 6 minutes past 7. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Mike says this from Herne Bay. Why am I having to contribute towards the 3 million people getting a winter fuel bonus? And why is a single mother of 3 working in education entitled to it as well? Scrap the gold-plated public sector pensions and we'll all be better off. That's a very good point. You know, this whole winter fuel bonus business is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. You know, we've got the warm homes discount being made available to millions of people, according to Keir Starmer. We'll play you that video again in a moment. And in fact, you know, the truth of it is that we are the ones who will subsidise it, because the people who are eligible for it get a discount, and those of us who are not eligible for it have our prices put up by the government and by the energy suppliers in order to pay for the subsidy. So it's absolutely a killer punch to anyone who wants to actually try and make a living and want to pay for their own business. You end up having to pay for somebody else's as well. One from Anthony in the North East, who seems to have got his knickers in a twist. He says, Mike, you were talking rubbish again about consultants' pay and making comparisons to bus drivers and shop workers who work very hard as well. Well, actually, that was Deanna Davidson who made that comparison, not me. Seriously, try comparing the wages of a train driver to a junior doctor who earns far less. Well, train drivers are overpaid, in my view. That's not their fault. That's the fault of the government for giving it to them. Junior doctors are also paid pretty well, I think you'll find, Anthony. And if junior doctors are paid less than train drivers, maybe junior doctors should be train drivers. If they don't like what they're being paid to do the job they do, they shouldn't do it. And consultants is what the argument's about, by the way. It's not about junior doctors. And consultants make well in excess of £120,000 a year. And that's before bonuses, and that's before they work at weekends, and that's before they do private work. They want a 35% pay rise. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's talk to Benedict Spence, political commentator, a man who speaks a great deal of common sense. Benedict, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Who would have thought, I'm very well, thank you, who would have thought the NHS workers would come back for more money from the government? And who would have thought that consultants can't seem to scrape by on a six-figure salary?
Especially after the government was so keen to do deals with everybody.
Yes.
It's entirely a mystery as to how this has ended up happening. I must say that there is a problem with our medical sector in terms of pay, and that is simply that they speak English. And they can see the lives of their counterparts in people in Canada and Australia and the United States, where, to be fair, they are paid an awful lot more, even than our doctors and nurses are. And the thing is, in a world where everything is globalized and migration has been encouraged, a lot of our doctors and nurses sort of look at those fees and those wages and they think, well, why can't I have that? And the reality is, of course, this country is no longer very wealthy in comparison to a lot of these other places. We also have a very different system in terms of it being state-run, entirely centralized, rather than being privatized or partially privatized. So it's never going to be the case that we can afford to give them these wages. But nonetheless, you know, they've been told that this is the sort of thing that everybody should be allowed to do. You should just be able to sort of freely come and go as you please. And so they look at their peer competitors, and they look at many of their competitors in the NHS who are going over there, and they say, well, why can't I have a bit of that as well?
Yes, and that's all very well, but, you know, in the end, somebody has to say enough is enough in the NHS, don't they? Doesn't somebody have to get to grips with it? I mean, Keir Starmer just the other day was asked, what's your greatest achievement been in the first year that you've been Prime Minister? And he said, well, we promised to get 2 million appointments in the NHS made, and we've actually done better than that. We've had 3 million. And everybody just kind of had a collective sigh and just went, well, you might be making more appointments, but they're only because they've cancelled all the other appointments, and you're not actually moving the waiting lists at all. You're just moving people off one waiting list and moving them on to another one. Everybody knows the NHS is in absolute and utter decline and doesn't work by and large for anybody. So at what point will somebody get to grips with that and actually say, we need to reform it?
Yeah. You have to say that most people tend to get paid, not just in terms of the role that they perform, but in terms of their actual performance in that role. If you do a very good job, you're more likely to be able to get more money down the line. And the NHS is not doing a very good job of almost anything, actually, at the moment. So, you can't then turn around and say, well, we deserve it based on previous performance, or that this money would necessarily motivate us to work harder, because I think most people will be sat there going, well, it's already a bit of a mess, you ought to be working much harder. But the other thing, of course, is because it is a centralised, state-run operation, the amount of money that should be available to it is based on the performance of the economy in general, as a reflection of the economy and of government policies to allow businesses to grow and allow wealth to be created. We aren't doing a very good job of that. No. So actually, if you have a situation, if you have a system where actually the primary motivation of this government is to tax people first, rather than allow wealth to accrue, wealth that actually can be taxed rather than on properties and the like, well, you are going to have less money that you're able to pay to doctors and nurses. And I don't understand why people still aren't getting this. There still seems to be this desire to kill growth almost in the nest, rather than allow it to happen so that you can pay people in the public sector.
But isn't it fundamentally because they don't understand economics? Because you've got Rachel Reeves, who doesn't seem to understand that if you tax people up the wazoo, one, they will decide to try and avoid paying that tax the best way they can legally. Two, they might leave the country if they're really going to be taxed a lot. Or three, they will start to make less money. I mean, I spoke to a guy the other day who said he had a very successful company. He's now split it down into 3 smaller companies in order to avoid paying VAT. So he's brought them all down below the VAT threshold. You know, people do these kinds of things because they're smart business people. So instead of actually increasing the revenue to the exchequer, the revenue to the exchequer has gone down.
Oh, yeah, and the complexities of the tax system in this country are just beyond belief, actually. How difficult it is becoming for people. I have always been of the opinion that HMRC would probably earn a lot more money from businesses and the like if they simplified the whole thing and they had fewer incentives for people not to pay, because people aren't paying because, they're all sort of greedy, evil capitalists.
No.
They're doing it because the amount of money they're asked to pay is astronomical, and there is a sense of unfairness because it sort of creeps in through many different ways. If everything was very flat and upfront, I actually suspect a lot more people, business people and the like, would go, yeah, fair enough, that seems fair enough, and you've made my life easier. But actually, if you don't do that, if you're going to make it difficult, you incentivize people to go, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a pretty simple cause and effect, isn't it? I mean, they've pretty much killed off the housing market for the moment. It may change, but at the moment, the problem for people is, if they were thinking of moving house, the stamp duty has gone up by such an extent. I was talking to somebody the other day who said they were thinking, and obviously it's in the southeast where houses are very, very expensive. 1 in 20 homes now cost over £1 million, according to a piece in the Sun. This guy was saying, I was thinking of moving house. Don't have a massive house, but the stamp duty alone, which has now been increased to such a ridiculous extent, would have been £68,000. And he said, it's not that I'm a millionaire. He said, I simply can't afford to do that. So I'm not going to move. And I'm not going to... So the housing market remains static as a result of that, because people who would otherwise have thought about moving are just not doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, especially also at a time when younger people are wanting to get on the housing ladder to be able to start families, have children, all that sort of thing. The sheer number of older people who probably would quite like to downsize, who are being put off because they're going to be hit with a huge tax bill, which in many cases will wipe out an awful lot of the accrued money that they thought that they were going to get through the increase in the value of their property, which, to be clear, many pensioners were not sort of sat there thinking, well, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to go on a perpetual cruise drinking champagne for the rest of my life. They were thinking, this is what I'm going to live on in my old age. To then have the government sort of sweep in, almost in a cape and a mask, and go, that's ours now. Well, you're not going to incentivise people to move for that at all. It would be stupid to do that.
No, of course. Breaking news, by the way, sales at UK retailers were down last month as spending on food and clothing dipped. The Office for National Statistics said the total volume of retail sales fell by 2.7% in May. That's quite a big drop, isn't it?
It is, and it's all reflective. We've had this sort of very anemic growth, and you have sort of ups and downs of spending in very small quantities, always sort of in the low single digits. All of this, I'm afraid, is a sign of a country that is in a perpetual, very shallow, but very much there, recession. If people are not spending even, sort of above the very low levels that they were spending before, and you sort of tie that into economic growth, we had that sort of bumper month, I think it was in April, where it sort of went up 0.4% or something, and everybody was going, oh, isn't that fantastic? And you think, it's not really. These aren't margins that businesses can really use to operate on beyond sort of just treading water.
No, absolutely right. And I mean, look at the state of the nation when it comes to this not winter fuel allowance. It's the warm homes discount. I'm going to play a little video that Keir Starmer put out yesterday. They found some hapless woman somewhere in the country who wanted to welcome him into her home. Check this out.
Nicola, nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah.
We've got this really, what I think is a fantastic announcement today, which is the extension of the warm homes discount to another nearly 3 million people. So that'd be 6 million in all, £150 off the bill.
Yeah, so it will make a massive difference to me. So through the winter months, obviously, like most people, it's the most difficult with gas and electric. I've got a smart meter. I also have an app on the phone. So
this is your smart meter? Right, OK, look at this. And so this 150 will make a big difference.
Sort of £30 or £40 a month, really, that's going to be massive.
So which bit was Imogen doing? She was helping you tidy up?
Oh, yeah, and we even got soapy water and we were scrubbing all...
No.
Yeah, we did. I was really pleased for the opportunity to be able to talk to him, and the reason, obviously, for the visit today was to come out and speak to just normal, everyday people, and I'm one of those, so I'm a working parent, 3 children, I work in education. He just seemed really personable. He listened, so I think it's great that that's going to be available for people no matter what.
And as somebody pointed out earlier, she says 30 or 40 quid a month would be great, but it's actually not 30 or 40 quid a month, it's £150 a year, which is more like sort of 12 or 13 quid a month.
Yeah.
They didn't even check that before they put it out.
And in addition to that, you think, my word, what a miserable situation where you've got the government going, well, here you are, here's this 150 quid, which we're going to say is this, and people go, oh, thank you, 3 bags full, sir, isn't this fantastic? Most people will be sat there going, that is going to make such a small dent in my life. Actually, what I need is so much more support. And it isn't that people are saying necessarily to the government, please give us money. They're saying, get out of our way.
Right.
Stop taking so much money of our money in the first place. And I mean, I'm very glad for this individual who seems so unbelievably welcoming to the Prime Minister. I'm sure she's not a member of the Labour Party or an activist at all.
No, absolutely.
For many
not.
other people, they will be looking at this and going, this is very patronising.
Yeah, absolutely right. Benedict, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Benedict Spencer, political commentator. Coming up, we're going to be joined by Sir James Cleverly, MP, the former Foreign Secretary. We'll ask him about what should happen to those people who were stranded in Israel without any help from the Foreign Office at all. Let's get a voice note from Martin.
Morning, Mike. As regards the ECHR helping these rapists to stay in this country, why doesn't some of these lawyers, or some lawyers, apply the ECHR to protect the girls that have been raped and attacked? That way, getting rid of the criminals. Just a thought. Don't understand it myself, but there you go. Martin from Malvern. Cheers, Mike.
Martin, thank you very much indeed. This one from Steve, the Cornish pirate. Mike, I was reading the other day about the migrant boat gangs and a discount of 2,000 quid, and I was wondering if the people returning from Israel would find that it's a quicker option than going through the British Embassy and getting their help. Yeah, you might well ask that question. We'll be putting that to Sir James Cleverly. Coming next, right here on Talk.
you're absolutely right. I want to come home, but I can't because there's no safe route home from Israel to London.
That's crazy. What do you think will happen now? Have you actually at any point spoken to a human being at the Foreign Office?
No, we've not, and we've registered that there are family members and people that we're with who are vulnerable or elderly and need to get home. And I have to say, as you mentioned, I'm a councillor and I've been in touch with my local member of parliament and other colleagues that work in that world.
Is across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 21 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. And of course, we are here at the home of common sense, trying to solve the world's problems, trying to get your views on almost everything that's crossing our desk. Don't forget, if you miss the show or you tell anybody who misses the show to get the Morning Glory podcast, comes out around about 10:15 and 10:30ish every single weekday. We're here from 4 to 6. Try not to miss any of it because it is extremely entertaining and extremely educational, some might say. So James Cleverly is here, former Foreign Secretary, of course. So James, very good morning to you.
Mike, good morning.
Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Before we start, I just want to play you a little a clip that we have from yesterday. A guy called Max Radford got in touch with us. He's trapped in Israel. He's a British citizen. Can't get out. Wants to know what is going to be done to try and help him to get out. Have a look.
The Foreign Office just embarrasses itself compared to other countries. The plan is absolutely ludicrous. So what they're now telling us is, or suggesting that you can make your way to the Egyptian border or the Jordanian border to find your way out. To get to the Egyptian border, that's a 5-hour, partially dirt track trek through the desert to the south, to an unfriendly country with no protection, no shelters along the way. What are you supposed to do? Hide in a sand dune if there's a rocket attack. And by the way, it completely goes against local guidance. Local guidance is to stay close to a shelter. David Lammy, I'd say quite frankly, absolutely lied to my face. I posted online myself about how he absolutely stands with Israel and we are with you and we're behind you. And to be honest with you, throughout this war, he's paid nothing but lip service, and to be frank, been an absolute embarrassment to our country. Now that we have British citizens that are caught up in this, the ability of the Foreign Office and himself is quite frankly shambolic. But I do want to say one thing, that this proves one thing without shadow of a doubt, that Israel is absolutely right to go into Iran. These are ballistic missiles. Thank God for the Iron Dome. Millions of people would be harmed if not killed.
It's obviously an unfortunate situation, James. Probably a lot of these people went to Israel when they didn't know it was dangerous to go there. Should the Foreign Office be doing more for them?
Mike, I've been involved as Foreign Secretary and before that as a Minister in the Foreign Office on a number of evacuation operations, and they are never easy. And the lesson that I take from my experience in this is that keeping people informed accurately and in a timely way is absolutely key, and that includes members of Parliament. I've been contacted by people that I've worked with, professional colleagues and constituents who are currently stuck in Israel, and the thing that comes across over and over again is that they're getting conflicting advice. They're being told to move to Egypt or Jordan while simultaneously being told to stay put. MPs, when I was Foreign Secretary and we had to do something like this with people in Sudan, I made sure that MPs were kept well informed. So far, we've had no formal correspondence from the Foreign Office in terms of how to advise our constituents when they get in contact with us. So I'm having to just direct people to the Foreign Office website, and I would urge people to do that, register their presence in Israel. But the information to MPs is lacking, and the information to British people in Israel is inconsistent, and that is unbelievably frustrating and ultimately quite dangerous.
It really is, because this is a story that's been going on for a couple of days. We sort of picked up on it yesterday, kind of almost by accident, and suddenly we got a lot of people getting in touch with us who are listening to the show in Israel, who said, we just want to know what we can do, because at the moment, the suggestion of driving, some distance across a desert, effectively, to a foreign border with Egypt or Jordan, which is quite dangerous because they're told that, there's bombs flying in, there's ballistic missiles flying in from Iran. It's not a very safe place to be moving around in, unprotected. And David Lammy has been very quiet all week. He's hardly said a word about Iran. He's had nothing to say much about British policy in Iran. Keir Starmer's the same. We don't really know what Britain would do. The sort of Downing Street apparently was very wishy-washy yesterday when they were asked whether or not the Chagos Islands might be used for an American attack. We don't seem to be anywhere on this.
Well, I find this frustrating. I've been in David Lammy's position. Now, these are never easy, and I think it's only fair that I make it clear that circumstances like this are never easy. Airspace is closed, so the normal mechanisms for evacuating British citizens are denied to us. Clearly, we're not going to be able to put in any, British flagged aircraft or the armed forces or anything like that. So this is not an easy situation. But because it is such a difficult situation, clarity of information, speedy transmission of information, and useful and accurate information is absolutely key. And as I say, my frustration as now a backbench member of Parliament trying to help my constituents, trying to help colleagues, trying to help friends who have got in contact with me, is that I don't have updated, accurate information to send to them. Now, I'm in a lucky position. I've been able to get in touch with David Lammy. I've exchanged messages with David Lammy to let him know. I'm not asking for any special pleading or special favours, but I want him to know how disconcerting it is for the people that have contacted me.
Yeah.
That the information they're getting seems to be so, lacking in detail.
Yeah. It was suggested to me that there are aircraft in Cyprus, which is not obviously very far away from Israel, RAF aircraft, Hercules-type planes, C-17s I think they're called, which could go in and carry out possibly as many as 800 people at a time per plane. And we're also told that the Americans are airlifting American citizens out. So, it's possible to do, surely.
Well, things that are technically possible can sometimes be incredibly challenging militarily, diplomatically. Now, look, I don't know the practicalities, I don't know the details any more than any other backbencher would. And that's the point. So you ask me questions like that, Mike, and I can't give you a credible answer because I'm not getting the information from the Foreign Office as a member of Parliament.
All right.
And others will be in a similar situation. And that's really frustrating for us because we want to give our constituents the most up-to-date information.
What you can perhaps give me an indication of your thought process on is our policy currently with regard to an attack on Iran, because I don't know what it is. Keir Starmer has said that he wants to de-escalate the situation. G7 statement said they want to de-escalate the situation. It's obviously gone quite far beyond that now. Donald Trump says he's going to give them a couple of weeks. There's no real clue as to what Britain's role might be if anything happens. And I think the public deserves to know what our role is likely to entail, because, clearly Iran is a dangerous country to the world. They're supporters of terrorist activity in all sorts of different ways, whether it's through the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas, or whether it's activities even just on European soil. There are plenty of people who think that we should be helping the Americans, and there are some who don't think we should. And it's not clear which one of those Keir Starmer is.
Well, I listened to Keir Starmer speak for 60 seconds about this issue at the tail end of last week. And he basically said that they were, the UK was very concerned. He was concerned about escalation. These were calls for concern. And he kept telling us how he felt,
right,
but he wasn't telling us what he was planning to do.
Right.
And I think the challenge that he's now finding is there's no obviously popular right answer. All the options in front of us are difficult, and when confronted with challenging options like that, it seems that he freezes in the headlights like a rabbit on the road. And look, there are very, very good reasons to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. It has threatened to eradicate Israel entirely. It is a threat to its Arab neighbours, and it has conducted aggressive actions it has conducted aggressive actions in Europe as well. So preventing them getting a nuclear weapon is incredibly important. That's been a long-standing UK foreign policy objective. But this kind of, we'll see how it feels, we'll see what the Americans do, we'll tell you how we feel. All these things really does not inspire confidence. And in foreign affairs, clarity of thought, precision of information, and confidence in your outcomes is absolutely key. And we're just seeing none of those things from Keir Starmer.
No, and I suspect much of that has to do with Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, whose advice apparently to Keir Starmer is that launching an attack on Iran could be unlawful. I listened to Emily Thornberry, the former Attorney General, or former Shadow Attorney General, I think, on a show yesterday, who was saying basically we shouldn't help the Americans unless we're attacked. You know, which I think for most British people is going, oh, so we have to wait to be attacked before we do anything. You know, it's kind of mad.
Well, I don't think I've seen a single piece of advice from Lord Hermer that isn't contrary to what I believe is in Britain's best interest. I think it was a very foolish appointment, and it is clear that he misunderstands his job. His job is to make sure that he gives clear advice to the government, to the Prime Minister, to help us defend British interests and British people, rather than what he seems to have had a history of doing, which is finding ways of people who are opposed to our way of life, opposed to our security and economic interests, and be on their side of almost every argument. It was a shockingly bad appointment, and we're now seeing the repercussions in this frankly limiting and illogical advice.
Absolutely. Let me just ask you quickly about the economy. A couple of breaking news stories this morning. Sales at UK retailers down in May as spending on food and clothing dipped. Office of National Statistics say total volume of retail sales fell by 2.7% in May. Also, the Treasury borrowed more than expected during the month of May, despite increasing receipts from Rachel Reeves's tax raid. Public sector net borrowing £17.7 billion. Just last month. I mean, they're averaging around about 20 billion a month at this point. I mean, that is unsustainable, surely.
Well, the quote that you read out said, borrowing was higher than expected. Well, look, I was expecting borrowing to go up because the government's maths just doesn't balance.
No.
Rachel Reeves is claiming that she's going to get all these tax receipts, but is going out of her way to chase businesses out of the UK, to dissuade people from employing people, to basically remove money from the money supply so people aren't spending. So whilst the detail may be a bit of a surprise, that very negative direction of travel was entirely predictable and indeed entirely predicted. The simple fact of the matter is that this Labour government have got their economic policy completely back to front. They are chasing entrepreneurs out of the country. They are dissuading people from employing, and they are dissuading people from spending. They need to change all those things. Otherwise, we are going to go into the autumn of this year, I think, with unemployment rising, the economy stagnating, and all of us suffering.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very miserable looking summer. I mean, thank God the weather's actually good, because that's about anything to look forward to. But James, thank you very much indeed. Good to talk to you. So James Cleverly, MP, former Foreign Secretary there, with some very, very critical words for what the Labour government is doing, particularly economically. But what are they doing on Iran? What is the British government policy on Iran right now? Can anybody help us with that? 0344 499 1000, and that is the number. Joanna from Salisbury says, Mike, it says, I love the oh-so-grateful teacher for her £150 little help. If Starmer raised the basic allowance to £20,000 a year, where it should be, she would pay some £1,500 a year less tax. Obviously a Labour voter, and she doesn't teach maths. Well, no, she clearly doesn't, because she thinks that £150 a year is 30 or 40 quid a month, which it obviously isn't. Peter said, would it not be better to have energy that everyone can afford, rather than being proud of the fact that people cannot afford it? Well, exactly. And also, the whole thing is a con, because the money that is being handed out through the Warms Homes discount to millions and millions of people is subsidised by the other millions and millions of people who don't need it. So you're paying for it so that other people can benefit, which is hardly fair. Why would I be paying somebody else's heating bill because they haven't got as much money as I have? Doesn't seem right, does it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll talk about assisted dying. We're going to talk about migrants coming up as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:36. Julie Hartley-Brewer's column, of course, can be found in The Sun today and every Friday, so check it out. Alex Phillips will be here at 10 o'clock for her. As we said, the Treasury borrowed more than expected during the month of May, despite increasing receipts from Rachel Reeves' tax raid. It's all going a bit wrong, isn't it, for the old economy, for the woman who pretended that she worked at the Bank of England for longer than she actually did. Public sector net borrowing was £17.7 billion. Last month. So it's nearly £18 billion, right? And most of that is being borrowed because they haven't got any money. Some of it's being borrowed in order to pay off the borrowing they've already made. So some of it is actually being paid out in interest. So if you were running a household like that, you would soon run out of money. You'd have to ask all your mates, can I borrow a fiver? Why? I want to go down the pub. Well, you won't get much down the pub for a fiver, I'm afraid, unless you live somewhere, very, very far north. What are we going to do next week? You haven't got any money. Well, borrow some more. Right. Well, nobody wants to lend me any money. Who are you going to borrow it from? You just can't keep borrowing money and expect everything to be fine. Sales are down as well, so that means tax receipts are down, so that means VAT is down, so that means the Treasury's not making as much money as it was in April. So, I don't know whether you need an abacus, Ms. Rachel Reeves, or Rachel Thieves, as she's been known. I don't know. Let's talk to Lucy White, a public policy specialist on the situation going on in the Channel, Britain's broken borders, some might call it, because here we are. Once again, we've found something that we can all hang on to. This story in The Sun, a migrant and his dog rescued from the Channel after spending 3 days adrift in a dinghy after its motor failed. Now, in some ways, you're going to take your hat off to this guy, Lucy, because very good morning to you. He's decided, forget it, don't go to the people smugglers, don't give them 4,000 quid, don't even go to the Albanian ones who are offering a summer sail for 2,000 quid. Just find your own dinghy and set sail on your own.
Yeah, good morning, Mike.
Morning.
Very good to be here again. Yeah, I think, it's just getting ludicrous at the moment. People are taking all sorts of measures to get to our lovely country, and they don't want to spend £1,500 crossing a rubber dinghy. You can totally understand that. And I think what's really concerning at the moment is that along with the warmer weather, the sunny, summers upon us now, we're going to see an increase in illegal migrant crossings.
Yeah.
So last week on the 13th of June, in one single day, there were 919 illegal migrants that arrived in a single day.
Yeah, it is incredible, isn't it? I mean, the numbers just keep going up. The weather, as long as it continues to be as clement as it is going to mean that hundreds more are going to come in the coming week. And it's only 2 weeks really to go, slightly over that, I think, before we get to the year anniversary of the Labour government being in. And it looks as though they're going to come in with about 43, maybe 45,000 illegal migrants having come in the year that they've been in charge.
Exactly. And I think, well, just having listened to James Cleverly just now, where he spoke about Lord Hermer, I think Lord Hermer is catastrophic to our country in multiple ways. So, Lord Hermer himself compared those wanting to leave the ECHR to Nazis. I mean, this is just ludicrous. So he's blocking our ability to leave the ECHR. He's criticising those, but this narrative of calling us Nazis or racists, as we've known, it just isn't going to work anymore. We've been proven right with regards to the grooming gangs. We knew all along that these were Pakistani men committing the rapes, and this has been called out for decades now, and we were all labelled, far right conspiracy theorists or far right lunatics. And now even Jess Phillips herself has had to admit, and also Keir Starmer and their whole cabinet of Ponzis have had to admit that, yes, actually, this is the data and they were correct. So I think it's just a matter of time where others like Lord Hermer will also have to admit, actually, yes, they were right. We need to leave the ECHR. We need to end this problem. And no, they're not Nazis. They just care about their country, actually.
Yeah, exactly right. And, once again, we have a litany of cases this week of people who cannot be deported. I think we've had one every day. I actually call it Migrant of the Day. Today's Migrant of the Day is Olsi Behiluli, who came to the United Kingdom when he was 9 years old. He's an Albanian heroin dealer who once posed with £250,000 in cash. Apparently, he's been allowed to remain in this country because he's not considered to be an important enough kingpin of the heroin-selling drug gang. He's been sentenced to 11 years behind bars over what's been described as a senior role in drug dealing after he was caught with 8 kilos of high-purity heroin in 2015. But now he's going to be allowed to stay here because, we don't want to send him back because he's quite nice, really.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, two things here. So one is that every single person in the UK prison, it costs the government, well, when I say government, it costs us, the taxpayers, £40,000 per year per prisoner. And secondly, the UK government, i.e. us, the taxpayers, we are actually funding a brand new state-of-the-art prison in Tirana in Albania, which the purpose of that is that if there are better prisons in Albania, the Albanian government might be more likely to accept Albanian prisoners, Albanian criminals from the UK. So why are we sending money to Albania for their prison, yet we are keeping the Albanian criminals here? None of this makes sense. And then the other story, which was interesting, this was from yesterday, is that there was a Rochdale grooming gang, of course, Pakistani men. Let's just put that out there. As we're not going to beat around the bush. These Pakistani men, or should I say animals, ripped up their passports just so that they couldn't be deported back to Pakistan. And the UK cannot apparently make them stateless. It cannot deport them because they would be stateless without a passport. But this is absolutely ludicrous. We know they are Pakistani, so they should go back to Pakistan. And what we now need to start doing is we need to be doing checks such as dental checks for age, because we've had, 30-year-olds pretending to be 15-year-olds just to get access here. We need to start doing other sorts of scientific testing to confirm the actual, country of origin of these people. It's really not that hard. Whether it's a DNA test or other sorts of swabbing, you can easily tell the country, the home country of an individual, so they should be sent back to their country of origin. This is not our problem, and to be quite frank, I would prefer to see these Pakistani rapists stateless. Why don't we just send them away somewhere, and if they choose to rip up their passports, then that's their issue, quite frankly. That's not our problem.
Exactly right. I mean, it's not our problem, as you say, if they've decided that they don't wish to be Pakistani citizens for the obvious reason that they don't want to be sent back there. You know, that's where they're from. You know, there is a rule, I think, in British citizenship that you can't actually give up your citizenship. You cannot deny that you're a British citizen. Doesn't matter what you do. If you go to America and you say, I've decided to become an American citizen, the British government doesn't recognise that. And maybe the Pakistani government doesn't recognise it either. We should just send it back and leave it to them to worry about it.
Yeah, precisely. And one other thing I'm very concerned about is the number of British citizenship that we're granting among these countries. So last year alone, there were 22,153 Pakistanis that were granted British citizenship. And similarly for India, there were 24,800 Indians that were granted British citizenship. Like, why on earth are we doing this? They literally have their own countries, both India and Pakistan. They're not exactly war-torn countries. They are, and in fact, India is a flourishing economy.
Of course it is. I mean, I was reading a piece yesterday from, funnily enough, a very long piece actually that was posted on X from a magazine called India Today, and it was all about how bizarrely Mirpur, that place which is actually technically in sort of Pakistani Kashmir, which is where they want to build a new airport. You know, all those MPs from the Midlands who have been, you know, rallying around and trying to get money to build a new airport in Mirpur. This is where all the rape gang suspects come from. They all come from a very, very small part of Pakistan, which happens to be incredibly fundamentalist Islamic, incredibly misogynistic, and incredibly backward. You know, and that's where they're all coming from. This is not rocket science. You don't need to be, you know, a serious genealogist to work this stuff out.
No, exactly. Well, I think the other issue as to why we do have a high number of, you know, these sort of Pakistani MPs, for example, is because there is a large sectarian Muslim voting bloc.
Yeah.
But if you look at the statistics in terms of which groups are actually in employment, I believe, you know, the overwhelming majority, way above 50%, maybe closer to 70% of Pakistani women in the UK have never ever had a job in their entire lives.
Yeah.
And the majority of Pakistani men in this country have never had a job either. So if I were to run a policy, I would say, this is what has to happen. Those in this country that do not pay income tax and are unemployed and are not of our British heritage should not have the right to vote. And I think that's quite frankly one way in which we tackle this issue. Why should you get the right to vote if you're not contributing taxpayers' money? Because the government budget all comes from taxpayers. So you should not have the right to dictate how it's spent if you're not contributing to that pot.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, Lucy. I think I'd take it a step further and say that anybody who's convicted of a criminal offence shouldn't have the right to vote either. Or they should have some kind of, you know, cooling off period where you can't vote for 10 years or something, because that would make an awful lot of sense. Great to talk to you, Lucy White. Thank you very much indeed, public policy specialist there. Let's get a voice note from Liam.
Good morning, Mike. Liam in Folkestone. Earlier on this week, I got a Freedom of Information request back from the Home Office about how many illegals arrived in this country without a passport. And the answer is shocking. Out of the 141,000 people that turned up in Dover, 8,000 had a passport. 133,000 didn't. That's 95%. 95% we don't know anything about them, we don't know who they are, we don't know where they're from, and it is scary, especially considering Baroness Casey's review, which showed that illegal migrants are part of the problem. What are we doing? A state of national emergency needs to be called, and now. Anyway, have a great weekend. Cheers, mate.
Liam, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, well, keep your eyes peeled, because I think 900 new migrants came over in the first 2 days, I think, or 3 days of this week alone. So, you know, that's another 1,000 to add to the 40,000, 42,000 that we were in the week before that. So that would be 43,000. I'm still looking to get it up to 50,000 by the time we reach July the 4th. I wouldn't be surprised if it matters, if it actually gets to that. Mark in Norfolk makes a good point. He says, Mike, how does tearing up one's passport remove your citizenship of a particular country? I mean, if I rip up my British passport, does that mean I'm no longer British? It's perplexing to me. Well, no, you're absolutely right. It isn't. So, I mean, it's not as if these guys have ripped up their passports as they were coming over in a dinghy so that we don't know where they're from. These guys, these Pakistani grooming gang people, were Pakistani citizens. We know they are, so they are still, as far as we're concerned, Pakistani citizens. It doesn't matter if they've ripped up their passport. It doesn't matter if they've declared that they're no longer Pakistani. Surely the point is that that's what you are. and that's where you're going back to. John in Kidderminster says, morning, Mike. We were on holiday last year in Greece, in Corfu, actually, and we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to stay here forever? The weather, the lifestyle, etc. If only we'd known. All we needed to do was rip our passports up. Keep up the good work. Absolutely right. Tim Montgomery has been in touch. He says, would you stop saying the weather's great? Some of us hate it. I'm terribly sorry, as I said to Tim on social media. I know some people don't like the hot weather, but, you know, like it while it's here, because, you know, it won't be here for long. Unless you're Dale Vince, of course, in which case you want to moan and groan about the fact that the world is burning. It's burning up. You know, everybody's going to die. It's Scorchio. 7:49.
Do you regret being against an inquiry? You said some of the people calling it were jumping on a right-wing bandwagon. Are you going to apologise for that?
Well, the people I was referring to, and I made this absolutely clear when I said it, were the politicians who had been in power and done absolutely nothing. And then as soon as they're out of power, are screaming and shouting. So Kemi Badenoch, Chris Philp, those individuals, when they were in power, did absolutely nothing. Now, I've been campaigning and working on this for 15 years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. One of the things about that story of the guy who came up across the channel on his own, in his own dinghy, with a dog. He's from Afghanistan, right? He claims his name's Barry. And I was making fun of the name Barry, saying I don't think I'd want to be called Barry. Barry has actually texted in to say, Mike, I'm traumatised. Barry in Germany here. Keep up the good show. I'm sorry, Barry. Yeah, and listen, I've got nothing against people who are called Barry. I just don't think a single migrant on his own in a dinghy who's come here from Afghanistan is actually called Barry. There's not much chance of that, is there? Surely to heavens. We're going to talk to Andrew Montford very shortly, Net Zero Watch Director. First, though, here's a gaffe from Theo Usherwood. Theo Usherwood. Go on.
There's not been a day since October the 7th when, you know, Hamas still holds Israeli hostages.
I can't believe you just did that. You've been down the bunker for too long.
Hostages.
I mean, he's only the second man in history who's confused the word hostages with sausages. That's quite incredible. Well done. Very, very good. We'll see Theo next week. Andrew, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, here we are. Apparently Ed Miliband doesn't really believe in his own policies. Who would have thought? He thinks, actually, he might have to go re-exploring for some oil and gas.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the financial pressure from the Treasury has ultimately told. I think the Chancellor has run out of money, and so they need these new oil fields to start producing to try and get their tax revenues up. I think it's not going to be enough. I think they're going to need a lot more money. But, it's a start. It's a glimmer of hope that, if you like, the rational side of the Labour Party is able to sort of win out over the net zero lunatics. That's good news, I guess.
Well, it means that he's also gone round the Supreme Court, who previously blocked the exploration of these two new fields in Scotland, Rosebank and Jackdaw, which meant that they could never actually be explored. So now...
Yeah, I think they're going to need some new laws to make sure that does get driven through. I think we will need legislation of some sort. That's my understanding.
But that's what Parliament's for, isn't it? Parliament is for getting around the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court shouldn't be making policy. The Supreme Court shouldn't be, forcing us into, sustainable energy, straitjackets just because they think that that's the right thing to do. The bleeding government should be making these laws.
Yeah, of course, the Supreme Court interprets the things like the ECHR and the Human Rights Act, if you like, in a very broad way that appeals to, if you like, left-wing activists. We are sort of stuck with the results. I think the ECHR and the Human Rights Act are ultimately going to have to go because they're making the country ungovernable, particularly in the area of energy. But in the meantime, we can override these things by putting specific laws through Parliament. But that it's a long and laborious process, and ultimately, I think the ECHR is going to, we are going to have to get out of it.
Yeah, no question at all. And what about this ridiculousness of the warm homes discount? We've been covering it today simply because Keir Starmer announced it yesterday. He went up and made this rather ridiculously elaborate video visiting a single mother of three who apparently qualifies for the warm homes discount. But we've been pointing out, as it was pointed out to us yesterday, that this is not, in fact, the government handing out money to people who can't afford to heat their homes. This is about the government handing out money from us because we'll be paying the difference, right?
Yeah. So this is essentially just robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
The warm home discount just takes money from, if you like, wealthier people, wealthier bill payers, and pays it over to poorer ones. And there's actually several elements of your average person's energy bill that operate in that way. So there's a separate scheme that takes money from wealthy bill payers and pays it to people who are on prepayment meters. So people who have got into trouble paying their bills in the past. And we subsidise such people, which is economically you're encouraging people not to pay their electricity bills.
Yeah, right.
Then you'll get a subsidy.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a bit bonkers, but that's the way.
But it's a subsidy that's paid for by everybody else in the same street that you live in. I mean, it doesn't make any economic sense at all. I mean, it's literally, as you say, it's not just robbing Peter to pay Paul; it's robbing us to pay Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's shuffling the deck chairs rather than actually trying to deal with the problem. The problem is that we have a very expensive, very inefficient energy system, and bills are rising inexorably. I mean, the cost of all the green nonsense puts your energy bill up by 25, maybe as much as £30 a year. Every year without fail. And yet we can't go on doing that. Industry can't afford it. Households can't afford it. That needs to get reversed. But, obviously we've got Mad Ed in power, and until, Keir Starmer deals with that and puts somebody more rational in charge, bills are going to keep going up. And there's a crisis coming.
Yeah, there's a crisis. I think it's already here. Great to talk to you. Andrew Montford, Director of Net Zero Watch. Thank you very much indeed. NHS pay, says Stephen, in Bromsgrove. And don't forget, please, to mention the 20% non-contributory pension that all medics get. Those who are retired early in our circle have £1 million plus pension pots? Well, I think so. And on assisted dying, Alan in Merseyside says, was this assisted dying bill in Labour's manifesto? If so, OK. But politicians seem to bring things forward that weren't in their manifesto or hide it away in the small print, knowing quite well later it's going to be a major issue. Well, I think people have said to me this week that neither the abortion conversation nor the assisted dying conversation were at all anywhere near Labour's manifesto, but they seem to be things that they want to push through with some speed and some alacrity. Which is unfortunately a bad thing. Jim says this: the politicians can't regain trust with the electorate. They have blown it big time. That was a question that we asked with Deanna Davison a little bit earlier on. Coming up in the next hour, Steve Baker is going to be here, former Conservative government minister, of course. We'll get his view on what's going on with the Iranian policy. This, of course, is Morning Glory. Back after the news. We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed. Very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
We're everywhere.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 8 and we are here. It's Friday. We've reached the end of yet another week, ladies and gentlemen. It's been another bouncy one. It's been a bit difficult in parts, but, you know, it's been a very hot one as well. And it's going to be an even hotter weekend. We had a record 32 degrees temperature down here in the south of England. And it's apparently pretty hot everywhere. So, of course, if you're watching the BBC right now, and if you see the weather map, it looks very, very red indeed. It looks as if we're all going to hell. But it's not that bad. Because what we're coming up with today in this hour, Steve Baker's here, former Conservative Government Minister. Steve, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's very hot in your neck of the woods down in Cornwall, I would imagine, but you'll have all sorts of tourists down there.
It's a good reminder to go home and see my parents. Thank you very much.
Absolutely right. We've been talking this morning about a lot of things, including, of course, what on earth is this government's policy towards an attack on Iran? We don't seem to know. Here, Starmer doesn't seem to know. There's a load of Brits stranded in Israel as well. Let's get a voice note from Dan on that.
Morning, Mike. It's Dan from Kent. Does the Foreign Office or the government
as a whole have any friendly dialogue with Israel? I mean, the government is constantly criticising Israel and Gaza, and Lamy's just recently sanctioned 2 government ministers. Maybe that's why we can't rescue our own people. Israel is ignoring us. Just a thought.
Yeah, it's a very good thought. Dan will explore that one. Also, we're going to look at the resignation of Vicky Foxcroft, who is, of course, a Labour whip. She resigned over the proposed reforms to disability benefits. She said yesterday, with a heavy heart, I've written to the Prime Minister to tender my resignation as a whip. Steve Baker's got plenty to say about that. We'll find out what that's all about, what that could mean for Keir Starmer and his working majority, and the difficulties he's going to face when all of the Labour backbenchers work out that they're all going to be out of a job when there's an election, because none of them are going to be voted back in. Also, we're going to talk about the man who came across the channel on his own. It's a new form of travel from migrants. Just get your own dinghy, get yourself a dog, and come across. He's a guy from Afghanistan. He claims his name's Barry. I'm not buying that. I'm definitely not buying that. I don't think anyone from Afghanistan is called Barry. Also, we're talking about the doctors' strike. The consultants now want to go on strike, not content with being paid in excess of £120,000 a year for their basic work. And they want a 35% pay rise, for heaven's sake. Talk about greedy. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. We've heard as well this morning about the warm homes discount being offered by Keir Starmer to various people who apparently will qualify for it. But the problem with the warm homes discount is that the people who don't get it will subsidise the people who do. So if you've got a neighbour who gets it, you'll be paying for their electricity and subsidy. Thank you very much indeed. Great stuff, isn't it? Steve, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. We've reached another Friday. It feels like the sort of the end of the week. So we're going to sort of try and tidy up a few things.
Yep.
We discovered yesterday, not entirely on our own, that there's an awful lot of people stuck in Israel who are British citizens who went there for various reasons. Some are on holiday, some of them working, some of them went for weddings, that kind of thing. Yeah. They're very confused because there's nothing being said to them by the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office basically said, if you can, make your own way to the Egyptian border and then just get out of the country. I mean, it seems incredible to me.
It is a bit surprising when there's been a war in Israel for a little while.
Yeah.
But that said, also, I'm quite a fan of people being able to travel around the world without telling the government where they've gone.
Yes.
But in a war zone, maybe you should make an exception. Right. But yeah, I mean, of course, there are plenty of people in the UK who want to go to Israel for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that a lot of these people, of course, went to Israel before the commercial flights were stopped. So in their eyes, yes, of course, Israel's always in the kind of in the spotlight when it comes to, you know, rockets coming in from Gaza and Lebanon. But, you know, this is a slightly different case where all commercial flights have now been stopped. I mean, shouldn't the government be doing a bit more for them?
They probably should, but honestly, as taxpayers, I think if you went to Israel when there was the war on, you should have thought that commercial flights might stop. I'm a bit reluctant to keep flying people around the world. I mean, we saw it with Afghanistan and elsewhere. It costs an absolute fortune. I'm afraid people should take responsibility. If they go to a war zone, they should know they might have a problem.
I just worry that David Lammy, if this was another country, might be making a bit more of an effort. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. He may do. I'm not a big fan of David Lammy, but equally, I think that, you know, people do have to take responsibility when they go to a war zone.
I get that. What about our policy towards an attack on Iran? Because we don't seem to have one.
We absolutely should know by now. It's not a surprise. I mean, the Israelis were telling everyone who would listen, including MPs, as I was, like me. I mean, they were saying if they can't allow Iran to have the bomb, they believe that Iran would use a nuclear bomb against them. So, of course, they were going to attack as soon as those weapons inspectors said that Iran was enriching uranium beyond the level for civilian use. So it shouldn't be a surprise. And the other thing is, it's not our first time. As a result of the Iraq war, there's a manual goes around government called The Good Operation. It's available to the public. It's a checklist of 10 questions, all fleshed out and elaborated. And by now, really, the Foreign Office, the MOD, should have answered all those questions extensively, and they should be able to tell Keir Starmer whether we're going into bomb Iran or not with President Trump.
Because apparently, when asked yesterday, the government spokesman at number 10 refused to answer a question, are we going to be in support of America if they decide to attack Iran? And they said, that's a hypothetical, we're not going to get into that. Well, surely it's not a hypothetical, because there's a very good possibility, Donald Trump said it yesterday, you know, he's going to give them a couple of weeks. My view is that he'll probably do it sooner rather than later. So surely this government should have a policy that the people should know about. And also the other question, should he be having a conversation in Parliament with MPs to find out what they think?
Right, so this is so important. So one of the several reasons I got into politics was over the Iraq War and other wars. I think it's a terrible idea to ask MPs to vote for war.
Yeah.
Once they've voted for the thing, they will defend their vote.
Yeah.
It's a very natural thing. If you vote for it, you defend it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, what I want from the House of Commons is to scrutinise a Prime Minister who's taken the country to war. So don't ask him to vote. It was a terrible mistake. Blair had to do it because his MPs forced him, because they wanted to try and stop the Iraq War.
Yes.
Terrible idea. Much better. Theresa May used lethal force. She stood in the House of Commons, made a statement. MPs accepted what she said. She continued on.
Right.
But that's a better way to do it. Use the House of Commons to hold to account.
No, so, I'm not suggesting a vote, but I would like to see him in Parliament actually making a statement and saying, you know, this is what we're proposing to do.
And you know
these are the people we're proposing to use, and these are the RAF, machine, whatever, you know.
Do you know what? That manual, the good operation, would be a good template for a statement. It should go through, why do we care? What would success look like?
Right.
You know, what will exiting look like?
Right.
They should be really clear. Are they going to try and produce regime change in Iran? Is that a good idea?
Well, we don't know, because all we've heard from Starmer so far is the G7 sort of line, which is we'd like it to de-escalate. Well, you know, I'm sorry, when you're Israel and your nearest neighbour wants to destroy you and is trying to build a nuclear bomb, I don't think de-escalation is happening.
Well, I think the truth is we employ, good people at MI6 to know what's going on secretly, and we've got great analysts at the Foreign Office, and they should be advising the Prime Minister. The mistake he's making, of course, it won't be that he doesn't know what to do or hasn't been advised. It's that he's not communicating well to the public. What people are dying to know,
exactly.
love to know, that what are we going to do? But of course, Trump is extremely unpredictable. He's said himself, no one knows what he's going to do.
Right.
But that's not an excuse for us not having a policy.
Exactly. And the other problem is Lord Hermer, his mate, the Attorney General, who seems obsessed with human rights and doesn't want to do anything that would breach that kind of, mantra of his. He's saying that it might be illegal to attack Iran.
Well, you know what? It might be illegal.
But I don't want these lawyers anywhere near this stuff. I remember Tony Blair made sure that his Attorney General said that it was legal to attack Iraq because he thought that gave it a sort of extra oomph, if you like. But we don't need Attorney Generals to say it's legal or illegal, do we?
Well, it's very, very important to know when we use lethal force that we have done so justly. I mean, if you look at what happens to our special forces in particular, there was a recent BBC documentary which I thought was wholly disproportionate. But our special forces and others do get pursued by activist lawyers, and I'd get myself in trouble calling them activists. But
no, they are activist lawyers. You're quite right.
Yeah, but we have to be able to use lethal force. That means there has to be boundaries. What's required, of course, is sensible legal advice. And if you're not getting sensible legal advice, get a different lawyer. But international law, as we know, it's not like domestic law. It's very susceptible to interpretation.
No, it absolutely is. And I think the trouble is we've now got a government of lawyers, which is not what you want. If you want a lawyer, as you say, go and get one. But if you want a politician, that's what we want, really, isn't it?
We've got progressive lefties in government, and that is always going to be a disaster. They've got very, very strange ideas about what's true and right, and they're going to make a pig's ear of it.
And that's what they're doing, isn't it, quite frankly?
I'm afraid so,
Keir Starmer, we've got another story here I just want to run past you. Council tax bills, apparently on the front page of the Times this morning. Council tax bills are going to go up in the south to fund reforms in the north.
Honestly,
if that's not a recipe for disaster, I don't know what is.
It really is, yeah. And it's so insulting to people in places like Wickham, which I used to represent, in Buckinghamshire, Aylesbury, elsewhere. The towns in the south have plenty of poverty. And the idea that we're all a land of milk and honey with the streets paved with gold is completely false. And because Labour think that justice is in these big aggregates, taking large numbers of people and saying, on average, how well off are they? They create massive injustice for genuinely poor people in places like Wickham. So it's a terrible idea. And it's going to be, again, a pig's ear will be made of it, because up in the north, where there's Labour councils, they will just spend profligately and make a disaster of it. All councils need to adopt free market reforms. They own way too much property, for example. We used to understand that when the state owned the means of production, that was communism. But now the state owns loads of property.
Well, to be fair, under the Tories, the state got a lot bigger.
Oh, well,
you know?
yeah, and how many times...
I know people will say, well, that was because of COVID and all that, but no, it wasn't just COVID. You know, from Cameron on, you know, there was a kind of thirst for making the state bigger and employing more people, getting more advisors, getting more civil servants.
Well,
you know.
Mike, there's a reason I've got a reputation as a rebel, I'm afraid. I spent a lot of time telling my colleagues we had to be conservative.
Yeah. Exactly right, and that's what happened. They lost the plot because they refused to continue to be conservative, you know?
If you look at the financial projections that we have, and indeed the borrowing figures that have come out today, we've got a really serious problem. Promises have been made to the public which can't honestly be kept out of taxation. We're all getting older, medical care is getting more expensive, the cost of the NHS absolutely huge, cost of social care spiralling. We're going to go bankrupt unless we get a grip of spending. It's going to be hard. And the first
How
thing
can we get a grip of spending, though? Because it doesn't seem to be that clear from Labour what they're going to do. They keep saying they're going to save money, but they don't.
Well, so they're not really the party of saving money from the government, are they?
They're not.
But to give them their credit, they decided that they would reduce winter fuel payments to better off pensioners.
Yes.
And the Conservative Party and Reform decided to oppose that for merely political purposes. But honestly, if we can't stop paying winter fuel payments to people who don't need it, how are we ever going to get
Don't you think they could have done that better? Because they didn't say they were stopping it for better off people. They said that we're just stopping it.
Well, they certainly could.
And we actually said to them, because I had people on from all sorts of Help the Aged and charities around the country who said, look, they can do this, nobody's going to have a problem with it, but they've got to do it differently. They've got to give it a bit of time, give it a year so that people can sort of get ready for it, and also, you know, make sure the people who do need it get it. And that's not what they did.
Yeah, absolutely. So if it was me, I would have stood up and said, look, we've got a serious problem in this country. Here are the financial projections. They lead to ruin. But what we're going to do is look after the people who need looking after. The purpose of the government is to maximise the well-being of everyone. That means lower taxes for those who can look after themselves, and for those who can't look after themselves, we're going to make sure you can heat your home, you don't die of the cold. So we're going to rebalance these benefits for pensioners towards those who are genuinely poor. And if you positioned it like that, it would have been a thing that actually everyone would have understood.
People would have gone fine.
But honestly, that just points to the nonsense of politics. I mean, the Ed Miliband's now going to have to go for oil and gas. Well, of course he is going to have to go.
Of course he is.
But in opposition...
Makes him look idiotic.
And it is idiotic. But idiot politicians, I'm afraid, do what is expedient in the moment when they're in opposition. If they would just think and do what was right, the public might have a bit of more respect.
Well, we talked... Deanna Davison was in earlier this morning because she's over visiting from Brazil, doing the papers with me, and I was saying to her, people have lost faith in politicians. They really have.
Well,
as a result of all manner of things, but largely down to the fact that people think that they talk down to them, people think that they tell lies, they don't do what they said they were going to do, and we asked the question, she asked the question, well, how do we get that trust back? Well, and that's a really good question, because I don't know the answer to that.
Well, so that was been very, very close to my heart, this one, because I got into politics only because I was so fed up with politics and politicians. I thought, emigrate, there's nowhere to go. Sit at home moaning, I don't want to be bitter, or I can stand and try and do it myself. I always had 5 tests of everything I said or wrote. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it beneficial? Is it rightly motivated? And do I have permission? And the only one that's hard is permission, because you don't need your opponent's permission to criticise them. If only politicians would behave with a bit more integrity. Now, I'm not going to say I never made a mistake. I'm not going to say I never did things that people disagreed with.
But you get forgiven for that.
But if you're earnest, I definitely think I've got a reputation for earnestness. But I'm afraid the machine politics we face, where people just try and persuade the swing voters with what seems expedient, that kind of politics is dying, because people are not fools, they can see right through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a bit of breaking news for you. Pro-Palestine protesters, this will shock you, have broken into RAF Bryce Norton and damaged 2 military planes. Palestine Action said 2 of its activists had broken into the RAF base in Oxfordshire and sprayed red paint into the engines of 2 Airbus Voyager aircraft. I think we've got some footage of it happening right here. I don't know if this is their footage, but it's I'm not seeing it yet. Is it coming in? Have we got it? We haven't got it yet. I mean, how does that happen? How does the RAF Bryce Norton allow these people to get into the... here we are. This is obviously their footage, I'm guessing. How on earth do you break into an RAF base? Isn't there supposed to be guards on it?
Well, there absolutely are guards. I mean, I'm ex-Air Force, and there are guards, there are armed guards, but unfortunately...
So you're familiar with Bryce Norton, presumably?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I lived at Bryce Norton when my wife was there. But it's a very, very large airfield with fences all around the outside, and it's conceivable that they turned up, cut the fence and got in.
Well, that shouldn't be able to happen, though, should it?
Well, you'd like to think that it couldn't happen. Certainly, during a war, you would not want special forces nipping over the fence and doing worse.
No,
but
that's
what
I mean.
would say with these guys, they're jolly lucky that they, because there is lethal forces available. I mean, obviously not against people who aren't a lethal threat, but they should be very, very careful.
But it could happen.
It could if a mistake was made, yeah. And that is a very, very expensive bit of criminal damage we're looking at there.
It really
is.
It's
reckless and wrong, and they should be prosecuted to the absolute limit of the law.
Yeah, absolutely right. We'll bring you updates on that as we get it. I don't know whether they've been taken into custody. I don't know whether anybody knows any more about that, but we'll get more on it very shortly. Let's talk about Vicky Foxcroft. This is the Labour whip who resigned yesterday. She's Labour MP for Lewisham North, thought to be a fairly key part of the kind of the Labour machine, if you like, in Westminster.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us what you make of it.
Well, she's a sensible person. We're only on nodding acquaintance, but she was in opposition, the Shadow Disability Minister, so she's had a lot to say about disability benefits. Okay. And she's also been a whip, so she knows intimately how the whip's office works. As a convention, whips do not resign. Right. They are very, very tightly bound to one another because their job is to get their colleagues to vote for the business, whatever it is. Right. So it's very, very significant that a member of the Labour whip's office has resigned and taken what for them is the moral high ground.
And this is over the disability cuts.
Over the disability cuts. What is she going to do now? Because if she decides to start organising disgruntled Labour MPs, perhaps Labour MPs, as you indicated, who think they might not win their seat again, people who've got a lot of voters on the left telling them not to cut disability benefits, because it's absolutely not what Labour does. Right. If she starts organising, I think she could very rapidly get to 80-plus MPs willing to rebel. And Labour's majority is 165.
I was going to say it's about half, isn't it?
Sounds huge, doesn't it? But I know from my own experience that particularly when it's a sweet spot issue like this, do they really want to be voting for bombs, not benefits? Right. If she was...
And that's what it will look like, won't it?
Yeah, and that is what they're doing. Why? Well, the real world's caught up with them, but this could be an incredibly significant moment for the Labour Party. The Labour whips have been absolutely ruthless in suppressing and purging dissent out of the Labour Party in Parliament, because they know that once MPs realise that there's no consequences if you rebel, other than your reputation, but the sky doesn't fall in. Your colleagues are a bit grumpy for a few days and then you all move on. So they've withdrawn the whip from left-wing MPs and so on, which means they can't stand again as a Labour candidate. So they've been utterly ruthless and politically brutal. Well, now one of their own has left the whip's office. So how grimly determined is she going to be to make the point? She now must rebel herself, but will she start organising? Will she start standing up for it? Because her colleagues are going to impress upon her the need to look after them and provide leadership. Well, will she do it? If she does decide to do it, she might become a very important force in the Labour Party. If she starts getting 80, 90, 100 Labour MPs on WhatsApp groups, she could run rings around the Labour whips, and I bet they know it.
And that also puts even more pressure on Keir Starmer, who's already feeling pressure from all sorts of different places, isn't
Absolutely,
he?
yeah.
And we know now the buckles to it, because, these are the same Labour whips who made everybody vote in January, or was it later, slightly later than that, against having a national inquiry into the grooming gangs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, being a politician is absolutely brutal, because the public are very clear what they want from you. I mean, admittedly, not all 75,000 constituents at once, thank goodness, but your inbox is always full of the most strident advice on what you should do. So being an MP, you really are in the crucible. It's a choice. They don't deserve sympathy. You choose to be on the hot seat. So what are they going to do? You're always being pushed pillar to post. Keir Starmer, of course, has got the problem that he needs to maintain discipline in his party. He has to maintain that by giving MPs a little bit of what they want, because, of course, you only go into Parliament to try and get something done. So let's not pretend it's easy for any Prime Minister. It's hard. But this could be a turning point, because, as I say, the Labour whips are an incredible operation. Ruthless, determined, efficient. They have absolutely kept that Labour Party together and disciplined. But now, as I say, one of their own has resigned from the whip's office. What she does now will really determine the Labour Party's future in this Parliament.
And you said it, bombs, not benefits. That's not what they stand for, supposedly. So
that's not what they stand for,
problem.
But they've been trying to... This is where they catch themselves up. They've been too clever by half. For months and months, since before the election, they've been trying to position to the Conservative Party's right, which unfortunately has not been very difficult.
No.
But they've been trying to position to our right in order to turn a broad and shallow majority into a deep one, trying to make themselves the party of government. Well, it looks laughable now, doesn't it?
It does.
But in all this posturing to the right, that's asked a lot of left-wing Labour MPs. It's asked a lot of Blairite Labour MPs. I'm afraid I can't help smiling. The miserable things, the horrible things they've said to Tory MPs over the years, well, now it's going to come back and bite them.
Well, some of the rhetoric on immigration, you know, is something that they would have absolutely castigated.
Oh, look, if Labour had been a bit more sensible, everyone in the House of Commons contributes to defining where the terrain of political debate is, especially the Leader of the Opposition and the shadow front bench. So if the Labour Party had been just a bit more sensible over 14 years, people would have respected them a bit more. They wouldn't look fools now, and we would have achieved a lot more. Because it's all very well, people might say, oh, well, you had power. Well, it's true we had a majority, but I'm afraid the way that democracy works, with swing voters deciding whether MPs are elected or not, it does matter where the Labour Party puts the terrain of debate and where the Conservative and Reform put it. It really matters to what happens. So in these circumstances, it's really important that the Conservative Party is forward-thinking. They need to back benefit cuts. They need to back them because it's right, because we need to control spending. That will mean that the Labour Party starts fragmenting. They'll end up with a growing group of dissident Labour MPs in a position of hopelessness. They can't win any votes, but they're getting lots of pressure from their colleagues. The public will be egging them on. It's a real powder keg of politics.
Yeah, fascinating. Great to see you, Steve. Thank you very much indeed. Former Conservative Government Minister, of course, Steve Baker. I'm going to start calling you one of the great thinkers of our time, I think, because that was really interesting. Very interesting. Let's get a voice note from Pete on small boats.
Keir Starmer up in the council tax in the south. Oh, well, that then trying to force all the people that live down here to think, I'm going to move north, right, to get myself a cheaper house because I can't afford to live down here anymore. And that then leaves all these houses empty down here for all these illegal immigrants getting off the boats, doesn't it? Oh, I bet he's got a plan like that. That would be the sort of thing he does, isn't it? Good God, how did we put up with this person?
I don't know, is a straight answer.
I love your
they're brilliant. Stuart says this, Reeve's private sector growth policy is to chase millionaire entrepreneurs out of the country and replace them with low-skilled migrants working in the black market. Seems to be going that way. I'm not sure if that was the plan, but that's where we are. It's 25 past 8.
For me, it's quite straightforward. I would simply deport him. I don't think.
I just put him on a dinghy and send him out into the channel.
I'd send him straight back to wherever he's from.
But we can't. Legally we can't. We can't fly him back to Afghanistan. They won't have him back.
Well, if those people won't accept them, then we cut off all foreign aid until they start to behave sensibly, because we can't have people here who don't respect our culture, don't respect our laws, and actually damage our own way of life. I think the British people have had enough of it now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8 to 28. I'm Mike Graham. The time is really flying this morning. I don't know where we're going. Well, I do know where we're going. It's a big weekend for me as well. I'm going away for the weekend this weekend. I'm going to go to a wedding, which would be rather nice. Mark in Selby says, I'm not surprised that Keith was giddy with excitement at being shown a smart meter by that woman. He rarely gets a chance to see anyone or any decision that could be labelled smart while saving his bunker at number 10. Jane says, Starmer can't do anything right. He just doesn't sound sincere. He's false to the core. Just an awful man. I mean, it's very hard to disagree with any of that, really. And one from Mick in Barnsley who says, Morning, Mike. I can't believe Starmer has found a single person who has let him into the house. He looked like a school kid looking at the smart meter. The anagram of smarter is smarter, or starter is smarter. So two things. First, if he was smart, he would realise 99% of the country hates him and resign. Second, smart meters have a chip. Maybe Starmer should replace his chip because I think he's still running on Windows 95. He's so far out of touch. Mick in Barnsley, Windows 95, that takes you back, doesn't it? Do you remember the old days when they used to have weather maps that actually showed you what the weather was doing, as opposed to trying to make out that the world was in fact boiling before your very eyes? Well, Jamie Jenkins is here, independent statistician, because, of course, the BBC has been loving it this week. If you've managed to catch it, I mean, we sort of see it on one of our many screens that we have here, because I don't watch the BBC at all. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's no point, right? But basically... here's one of their sort of weather clips. Have a look at this.
The Met Office also found that temperatures as high as 46.6 degrees Celsius are now possible in today's UK climate.
Climate change isn't a distant threat. It's happening now.
Oh dear, it's happening now. Jamie Jenkins, we're all going to die. What's going on?
Yeah, good morning, Mike. You better watch yourself at this wedding on the weekend. They might be cooking the food outside or not in the oven, just putting it on the table outside.
Just chuck it on the car bonnet. I mean, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's absolutely mental, this one, Mike. And what they do, what this number comes from, and that was the clip from the BBC News a couple of evenings ago. And there's no context there. It just says 46.6 degrees is now possible. All the Met Office have done is chuck a load of data from the last 60 years into some simulation model, Mike. They've simulated loads and loads and loads of different summers, and in one of the outcomes, that 46.6 degrees come up. So basically, it's a 1 in 2,500 year event. And you know, what year are we in now? You know, 2025. Right. So it's very unlikely to happen between now and 4,525 miles. So it's absolute nonsense. But no context given, just to see. And then they tag on the back end, as you played in that clip then, about climate change is real and everybody should be worried. You know, it's all that fear. These models, Mike, are probably worse than the COVID models. Really. So we're talking back in the day.
And I can't remember when it started, but we talk about this quite a lot. But when they started doing those red maps, you know, I mean, you look at a map now compared to what it was like back in the sort of 70s and the 80s. You know, the general map was kind of green. It used to have a little bit of blue on it. It would sort of go to maybe a little yellow if it was a bit warmer. But now we've got these kind of ridiculous-looking scarlet, you know, red, sort of dark brown, you know, then black, I think, in some cases where it's going to be really hot. You know, it's like a sort of fear-mongering weather map.
Oh, totally. I've highlighted this a few times, and then people have come back to me to say it's all to do with how we visualise things and basically colour blindness, and that's why they do it. But yeah, a map for 25 degrees back in the 1990s is a bit of yellow. Now it's dark red, as if it's, you know, the world's going to catch on fire and burn us to death. It's just fear, Mike, fear, nonsense.
Well, it is. I mean, I think it was before. I mean, they haven't actually done it this week, which surprises me. But the last time we had a bit of a heat wave, they were warning us about wildfires, you know, as if we live in the sort of outback in Australia.
And the thing with wildfires, and this has been covered all over the news in the last couple of years, is that they talk as if people are basically, you know, the sun's shining and then the ground's just catching fire. A lot of these wildfires, Mike, are actually arson, but they fail to report. When we had all those Greek wildfires a couple of years ago, it was just literally climate change is real, look at all these wildfires. And the local Greece reporters were reporting the arson that was going on. But the national news here wasn't doing that. And that's the bit that's normally missing, is actually the facts of what really is happening.
Yeah, well, exactly right. Let's talk a bit about the stats that have come out today. Sales at UK retailers down last month. Spending on food and clothing dipped. The Office for National Statistics, your former gaffers, said the total volume of retail sales has fallen by 2.7%. I imagine that's actually worse a figure than it looks.
Yeah, Mike, it's the biggest drop we've seen now since 2023, so before the Labour government came in. It's just more economic woe for the economy. So retail sales are down, food sales are down. We had the figures yesterday, I think, or a couple of days ago, showing food inflation's quite high as well. That's running around 4.4%. So is this a case of people can't even afford to buy the food that they want? We've had the public sector borrowing figures out this morning, I know you've been talking about, Mike, where those figures are up, and in part because taxes have gone up. We know that under Rachel Reeves, but they spent more money than they've got in on taxes, and the spending is pretty much going on more benefits, running departments. So what we've got, Mike, is taxes are going up, growth's coming down, consumer confidence is coming down. We're pretty much heading towards more economic woe and possibly a recession.
Yeah, well, I think that's really not far away. Technically speaking, a recession is what, 2 consecutive months of negative growth, effectively.
Yeah, that's what it is, a technical recession. And a lot of what drives recession is obviously consumer confidence. So consumers are cutting back. The Bank of England are still sticky with the interest rates are quite high. But the jobs figures that we had a couple of weeks ago were quite revealing. Mike, we know 109,000 fall in the jobs figures. And that's what's really the problem. If you've got fewer people employed, you get less tax coming in for those. So the government needs to borrow more money. And the figure that we've just had is the highest borrowing in May since records began, apart from the 1 month of COVID.
Right. 17.7 billion. It's a lot of money, isn't it?
17.7 billion. And they talk about, there's some dispute around this black hole that they say they inherited from the Tories. But, you know, they're getting black holes every single month. And we know how much the government was borrowing with COVID when they were telling people to stay at home. So to get a figure today, Mike, that's the highest since records began, apart from that, is quite a concerning figure, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk more about this story in the Telegraph today as well. Lloyds Bank is going to pull billions of pounds from Britain's stock market in another major blow to Rachel Reeves' efforts to boost the UK economy. Scottish Widows, which is their pension division, is going to move much of their money out of the UK and into the US markets because they perform better.
Yeah, and that's part of another damning statement of where you go. When you own British institutions investing money abroad, that is a big problem. Now, the investors themselves, they've got to look out for the people who are investing. They'll be running a lot of pension funds. So they've got to get the best returns for the people who are investing in those funds. And the fact that they are moving the money out of the UK damages the UK because there's less money circulating here. And it just kind of goes to support the narrative, really, that, you know, people are taking money out of the UK because they're concerned. We are in a low growth cycle here, Mike. It wasn't great the last 10 or 12 years, but at the moment, all those economic figures, the retail sales, the borrowing, the jobs, everything is indicating that things are pretty poor at the moment. And we only had Starmer and Reeves talking about we've turned the corner. Well, we must be turning a corner off the end of a cliff, Mike. That's the only thing we're ending.
That's the problem, yeah. You don't want to see what's round the corner because it's not very nice. And there's a great big horrible beast there about to eat you up. Jamie, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Jamie Jenkins, independent statistician. Breaking news, by the way, right now, this morning, just in, pro-Palestine protesters have broken into RAF Prize Norton and damaged 2 military planes. Palestine Action said 2 of its activists had broken into the RAF base in Oxfordshire and sprayed red paint into the engines of 2 Airbus Voyager aircraft, which seem to be used, I'm told, for most of the refuelling that's done in mid-air. How on earth did they get in? Let's get a voice note from Brian.
Morning, Mike. Brian at Southend. Just hearing your programme about, and the news bulletin about them activists who just broke into Prize Norton, you know, and damaged the aircraft. Surely that's an act of terrorism. And these people who have done it should be caught and they should be charged with terrorism. And get the full force of the law down on the actions of terrorism, and that means jail for life, and they should be made to do that. That will really deter them, because that is a really serious offence what they've done. They have incapacitated this country's need or anything to defend itself, whatever, ability to defend itself, by putting 2 military aircraft out of action. That is terrorism.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Brian. What an absolutely ridiculous state of affairs, though, that we are in a heightened state of alert. You should be anyway, if you know that the Iranians have actually threatened Britain, because they did that last week. They said that they would take action against the UK if the UK was in any way involved with an attack on their country by America, right? So we still don't yet know what the policy is on that, but we do know that we will be considered to be, you know, one of the minor Satans around the world, as Israel is, as the United States is the great Satan. That's the way they see us. They're never going to be friendly to us. So in that heightened state of alert, we should surely have better guards around RAF airfields, for heaven's sake. One here from, where is it? Starman, or Steve from Bexhill says, Starman needs to issue a statement saying that anybody illegally entering any military installation such as an airbase will be shot. This is disgraceful. I question the security at Brize Norton. Security needs to be massively stepped up. Absolutely right. Well, Steve Baker was just here and he said, you know, he worked, he's an ex-RAF man, he was in Brize Norton quite a lot of the time that he was in the RAF, and he said they're lucky that there was not lethal force used against them, because if you break into a military installation in this country, you know, you risk getting shot, you know. They're very lucky that they didn't get shot. But perhaps that question that was brought by Brian there is right. We should make it absolutely clear that anyone who does this is charged with a terrorist offence, a terrorism offence, which means you get locked up for a very long time. It appears they had scooters. It appears they somehow cut the wires to get in through the fence. I mean, what on earth is going on in the defence of our realm? Keir Starmer, I think we need to hear from you. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8 to 40, and we are here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. The asylum seeker who crossed in his own boat, says Daryl. Barry is a name in Afghanistan. That's B-A-R-I, not spelled Barry, B-A-R-R-Y. Apparently, it's common in the Pashto. There's a Taliban commander called Mullah Abdul Barry. When you first said it, I don't know why I had a vision of a brickie from Birmingham. Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I thought it was a very unlikely name for somebody from Afghanistan. I mean, if he's saying his last name is Barry, B-A-R-I, that's different. But if you go, what's your name? I'm from Afghanistan, it's Barry. Surely this guy, if he came to Afghanistan, Mullah Abdul Barry, would say, my name's Mullah, wouldn't he? Why would he say his name is Barry? Jacqueline in Liverpool says, morning, Mike. Your guest that implied that Brits should not have travelled to Israel because it was a war zone, could you please educate him that Israel has rockets and drones sent over daily to them, which the West ignores, therefore no one would ever visit if they listened to him? Well, I think that's right. I think it's not fair to have a load of British citizens trapped in Israel, unable to get out, when the government doesn't seem willing to do anything about it or do anything for them. Given the blatant anti-Israel stance that this Labour government have taken, I am sure it would not surprise me if Lammy and the Foreign Office are deliberately stalling any help towards British citizens there, particularly those stuck in Israel. Well, that's what I suspect. I suspect that there is something going wrong here. And that, I think, is very plain to see. Let's talk to Kevin Saunders, though, former Border Force Chief, because we've got plenty to talk about this morning. One, Kevin, a very good morning to you. We've got the current situation where we've got a guy, may or may not be called Barry, from Afghanistan, who's decided to come over on his own. Is this going to be the new form of migrancy? Because he's got a dog, he's got his own dinghy, and he just basically came across the channel alone. His engine cut out, and so he's been rescued and now he's been brought here, and he saved himself about $4 grand.
Yeah, one man and his dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he is allegedly come over from the Cherbourg Peninsula as well, which is about 100-odd miles. So if it's true, it's quite an interesting crossing, because that is a huge crossing, and how he managed to survive is absolutely incredible. So I'd like to know a lot more about this story. I'd love to be on the, love to do the screening interview with this guy, because this I don't think we know the full truth yet.
No. But it certainly gives you the idea that some other people might see that and go, well, maybe I should do that, you know, rather than coughing out, you know, 4,000 and even now in the cut rate summer sale, £2,000 to cross the channel with the migrant smuggling gangs. Just get yourself your own boat.
Well, yes, I mean, and the boat that he got is a tiny little boat. You know, it's a paddling pool boat with an engine, and but how he got across is incredible, absolutely incredible. I mean, the odds must be almost nil of surviving that crossing, but he did, if it's true, if he did come from the Cherbourg Peninsula.
Right. I mean, even if he didn't, he still made it across the whatever it is, the 20-odd mile crossing, even if it's at the closest point, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's only got to do 10 miles to get rescued, but he did a bit more than that. But yeah, and all those people going out to rescue him. I mean, at least the dog's all right.
At least the dog's all right. That's been taken into to care, I think. But we got more numbers coming in. It looks like about 900 people came in the first 3 days of this week, which is on top of the 2,000 that came the previous sort of few days before that. You know, so you're looking at, you know, possibly the equivalent of 43 to 44,000 now coming in the year since Labour got in. I keep saying this, and I'm not sure if I'll turn out to be right, but we could foreseeably get 50,000 in that first year, couldn't we? Even though we've only got about another 10 days to go.
Yes, we could easily get to 50,000. I've already been told off for saying that.
Why?
Because the government don't want to admit that you're going to get 50,000. But I think you could easily reach it this year. I mean, it's 2,000 in the last, 6 days?
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't include yesterday. I don't know what the figures were for yesterday.
Yeah, no, I don't either. But I think Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we're talking about 900. And I think just up to Saturday, we're talking about, you know, a couple of thousand.
Yeah, so a couple of thousand. We've got another couple of weeks in June to go, so that's probably another couple of thousand. So the numbers are going to go up and up and up and up. With no hope of it being stopped.
And we don't seem to have any clue as to how to stop it, really.
No, there is no cunning plan. Well, there is a cunning plan. The cunning plan is the French police actually get in the water and stop them. But I'll believe that when I see it.
Well, I saw that they started using tear gas the other day, but it seems to have the opposite effect than it's meant to. They were firing tear gas into the sort of sand dunes, and so all these sort of bleary-eyed migrants were wandering onto the beach and then just getting into the water.
Yes, to get rid of the tear gas. Yes, I thought that was quite amusing, actually.
Yeah.
But
yeah, bit counterproductive, to be honest.
A bit counterproductive.
Kevin, thank you very much indeed. Kevin Saunders, former Border Force Chief. Let's get a voice note from Carl on the stranded Brits.
I'm just listening to you about evacuating people from Israel. It's a national disgrace. America are definitely evacuating people, and we have, it's not the C-17, we have now the larger Atlas A400s in Cyprus, which can carry 37 tons, which is hundreds of people. They could get over to Israel within an hour or two and get everybody out. But once again, this pathetic Labour government is doing nothing, just leaving British citizens to fend for themselves, and it's an absolute disgrace which should never be forgotten.
It is an absolute disgrace. Incredible, isn't it? The breaking news this morning, pro-Palestine protesters have broken into RAF Brize Norton and damaged 2 military planes. Palestine Action said 2 of its activists had broken into the RAF base in Oxfordshire and sprayed red paint into the engines of 2 Airbus Voyager aircraft, making them, rendering them, presumably, unusable. And these are things that are going to be used to continue to refuel planes in the air when they can't land because of obviously operational situations. Now, it seems to me that when we were listening to Keir Starmer just the other week, when he said that we were bumping up our spending on defence, that we were absolutely setting ourselves out on a war footing, I thought that meant, presumably, they would be on high alert at all the bases around the country so that nobody could just wander in willy-nilly and throw paint around. Obviously, I was wrong. Let's have another look.
We are moving to war-fighting readiness. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
Yeah, well, if the Russians are coming, or the Iranians, we're in big trouble, matey, because you've just let in 2 hippies on scooters to an RAF base who seem to have been able to get in, not only wander around at free will, but to spray paint all over the place, and 2 engines of 2 RAF planes. What on earth is going wrong? Hoppy says this, Sean of Cheshire, I should say, primary role of the RAF regiment is airfield defence. What were they doing? Or is it now outsourced to Serco? Oh dear, RAF regiment always gets ribbed by the rest of the British military. Paul from Hull says, with regards to Bryce Norton break-in, all I can say is I would not like to be the guard commander on the base when that happened. Well, yeah, what was he doing? And Timothy says, Mike, Bryce Norton attack is treason. I believe treason on a military dock is punishable with death sentence. Does this apply to RAF fields? Well, we've got to discourage this kind of thing, because if these bozos think they can just attack any kind of military installation willy-nilly, it's not going to be a good thing. It's not going to end well. It's 8:49.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorism Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:52. I'm Mike Graham, of course, here all the way through until 10 o'clock. Those idiots who sabotage those planes, if they like Palestine so much, send them there now to live under that regime, says Ian. Steve said food sales down, probably due to free fat jabs. It could be. I mean, apparently there's so many of them. You do see people around, don't you? You do see people around who look as if they just are an awful lot thinner than they were. And you just go, oh, yeah, really? You think? Was that a good diet then? Alex Wilson is here. Is he? Yes, he is. Reform UK's London Assembly member, because, of course, he was back in the news yesterday having a look at Sadiq Khan. and trying to work out if Sadiq Khan is ever going to answer a question. Check this out.
If I was to barge through the barriers, I'm not going to, don't worry, but if I was to barge through the barriers, what would actually happen? What would actually happen to me? I know what would happen to me, because in a previous answer, you've talked about the 4 E's. You said that the staff are trying to engage. What does that mean? Educate, encourage, and then enforce. Why is enforcement... Now, these are enforcement officers. Why is enforcement... supposedly in their job title, why is that only ever the last resort? I think Londoners will be disappointed that these people are there to enforce, supposedly, and they're not, because that seems to be the lowest priority in those 4 E's that you give them to do.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure what the question was.
It's just on the cameras. It was the cameras we're covering. OK. OK, sorry about that.
So that was the response, Alex. Goodness gracious me. Sadiq Khan, a man who, generally speaking, is sort of rude when you ask him a question, he's now developed a new tactic, which is just not to answer it at all.
Yeah, so yesterday it was Mayor's Question Time, that monthly event where I get to have my my regular ding-dong with the Mayor, and yeah, I was talking about fair evasion. It's an issue that we've talked about on the show before, really important issue for Londoners, and I was trying to get an answer from sort of why the enforcement officers, it's in their job title, enforcement officers, and yet of all the things that they're supposed to do when they encounter fare evaders, enforcement seems to be the lowest priority. And as you saw from the clip there, he just paused, wound down the clock, didn't want to answer, because you know, that's what he does.
Yeah.
And it's terrible, because he's leading this city. He has a mandate to run the city. He was elected fair and square last year, but he's not doing a very good job. And there are all these things that we want to hold him to account for. The only power I have as an Assembly member is to ask him questions. And if he's not even going to answer those questions now, then it's a really sorry state of affairs, isn't it?
It really is absolutely ridiculous. Neil Garrett, who's the Tory there, also, I think, put a question in. Let's have a look at that.
Yep. I'm quite clear. As long as I'm Mayor, we will not be introducing paper mile.
And so then you've abandoned your net zero 2030 plan. Is that correct?
No, I'm quite clear. We still have a target to get to net zero by 2030.
So your own net zero 2030 plan, which I have here, says the scale of reductions required in traffic, the 27% that Assemblymember Russell was just talking about, is only possible with some form of road user charging. These are your words. You're the author of this report. And in the next paragraph, it goes on to clarify that means a pay per mile scheme.
I'm quite clear. We will not be doing paper mile as long as I'm Mayor, Chair.
But you're also quite clear that you weren't going to expand ULEZ to Outer London. You said that in July 2021. Then a few months later, you launched a consultation. And you were quite clear that you weren't going to build any housing on the Greenbelt. And you're now quite clear that you are going to build housing on the Greenbelt. So with the greatest of respect, I think your categorical denials of what you might not do in the future aren't worth much based on your own track record.
Yeah, I mean, you might say that. I couldn't possibly comment. But it's extraordinary, isn't he? How does he get away with it?
Yeah. So, yeah, with Neil's question there, he was going round and round in circles. I think the point that Neil was trying to make was that the Mayor is committed to this ridiculous accelerated green pathway, net zero, not by 2050, but by 2030.
Yeah.
And according to previous stuff that Sadiq himself has published, in order to hit that, he needs to introduce paper mile. But now he's saying he's not going to introduce paper mile. And yeah, Neil was trying to pick at the inconsistency there. Perfectly valid thing to do. What Neil won't tell you, though, is that the Tories won't actually challenge that 2030 target themselves. I'm the only member on that Assembly who thinks that actually even trying to go for that 2030 target, which is costing Londoners billions every year, or will do if it's delivered, I'm the only one that's saying, actually, let's spend our money in a different way altogether. Yeah. So with a reform Mayor, you wouldn't even have these questions about paper mile, because we'd straight away end the war on drivers. We'd get rid of the nonsense target for net zero by 2030. We'd get rid of the target for 80% of travel in London to be so-called active or public transport. Let people choose how they get around our city. The air is cleaner anyway. Technology is getting better and better. Let's just live and let live, and stop trying to force people into things that restrict their freedom, restrict their capability to go out and earn a living and enjoy our city.
Absolutely, because this time last year there was no toll on the Blackwall Tunnel, and now there is. He's built another tunnel as well, which also has a toll on it. But now the whole shape of traffic in that part of London has changed completely. And I don't think he ever said in any manifesto that I remember that they were going to put a toll on a tunnel which has been in existence for about 40 or 50 years, which has never previously had a toll on it.
Yeah, well, I tried to challenge him on this at the time as well. So we handed in, there was a local resident I think in Greenwich, who had gathered a very large petition, and when I submitted that on his behalf to the Assembly, it was actually the largest petition that the Assembly had been presented with, obviously calling for the charges on both the Blackwall and the Silvertown toll to not be introduced. But of course, he ignored that because, as he always says, it's a consultation, not a referendum. So if any kind of consultation that he runs, and you saw the same with the ULEZ expansion, if anything that he runs doesn't get the answer he wants, he'll just ignore it anyway because that's what he's like. He doesn't listen to Londoners when they're raising these really valid questions that people are so fed up with all these things he's getting wrong. And it's a shame because we deserve better.
We really do. He's just not interested in answering for himself or for anybody else on his administration. Alex, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Alex Wilson there from the London Assembly Group of Reform UK, of course. Mike says, George, I'm not sure of the cost of a small dinghy, but presumably Barry and his dog may have saved a few quid by cutting out the middlemen. He who dares wins, Rodney. Yeah, George, you're absolutely right. Michael from Islington says maybe this Barry bloke has smashed the gangs. Maybe he has. And Nefertati says, what with migrants bringing their own bloody dogs with them now? Not only do they get five-star hotels, but their dogs get better care than we do on the NHS. What a great show. And one here from Don in Stalybridge in Manchester. Good morning, Mike. This action by Palestinian protesters now proves that these people are not protesters, they are terrorists. Plain and simple. All Palestinian marches should now be banned, and anyone wearing a face mask at any of these marches should be arrested. But we all know Starmer will do nothing. He is totally spineless unless it's a hurty tweet. Well, yeah, he's totally spineless unless it's a hurty tweet from somebody who he doesn't like, i.e. somebody white and British. If you were a Palestinian and you put out a hurty tweet, I'm sure he'd be absolutely fine and dandy. No problem. The breaking news this morning is that RAF Prize Norton's security has been breached this morning. Pro-Palestine protesters have broken into the RAF base and damaged 2 military planes. Palestine Action said 2 of its activists have managed to spray red paint into the engines of 2 Airbus Voyager aircraft. For heaven's sake, what is going on in this country? This is Talk. We'll be back with John Rentoul after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9. We've reached Friday the 20th of June, ladies and gentlemen. There's plenty of news to talk about, of course. We're still waiting to find out whether Donald Trump is going to launch some kind of attack on Iran. The papers this morning have got slightly different versions of the stories. Trump steps back from the brink, is what it says on the front page of the Times. The Guardian has got Trump will decide on Iran within weeks. He's basically said he's going to give him a couple of weeks to figure out whether he's going to strike Iran or not. He's obviously got permission to do it. He's got a plan to do it. But will he do it? It's not that clear. Front page of the Daily Mail has got Robert Jenrick writing about why he's going to vote against assisted dying, a big vote in the Commons today. He says it's because of his nan, who basically lived for an awful lot longer than she was supposed to. She was given a terminal date, a terminal disease, a date by which she would probably die. She lived an awful lot longer than that, and he says for that reason alone, he doesn't want to give the state the right to get people to actually help each other to kill themselves. And that, I'm afraid, is a story that an awful lot of people have got involved in this morning as well. Coming up a little bit later on in this show, John Rentoul is going to be here. We'll be asking him what exactly is our policy in the Middle East, because Keir Starmer doesn't seem to know. He doesn't seem to know whether we're going to support the Americans or not. He doesn't seem to know whether it's lawful to attack Iran. It has shades of the Iraq war and all the toing and froing that went on in Parliament when Tony Blair was trying to rule whether it was legal or not. Lord Hermer apparently thinks it might be illegal. You know, there's all sorts of shenanigans. Meanwhile, the breaking news this morning is that pro-Palestine supporters have broken into RAF Bryce Norton and damaged 2 military planes. Unbelievably, Palestine Action say 2 of its activists broke into the base in Oxfordshire and sprayed red paint into the engines of 2 Airbus Voyager aircraft. Here's what Kitty has to say about that.
The RAF base infiltration is a terrorist attack, should be treated as such. They should not have been allowed to get on there in the first place. They definitely should have been shot on sight as a lesson to them and anyone else. They could have been hostile state. How do we know that hostile states haven't infiltrated our army bases? And our Prime Minister should be doing an immediate press release saying these far left thugs will be brought to justice immediately.
Unbelievable stuff, isn't it? Kitty's right. I mean, you know, it could have been anyone. And when you see the video footage, it looks as though they've got a couple of scooters with them. They somehow managed to breach the fence. They weren't spotted. They weren't picked up. And they, we understand it, have gone in and have left already. I don't think they were apprehended either. So as far as we know, they're still at large. Are we going to hear from Keir Starmer? Remember what he said just the other week? He said we were ready for all sorts of things.
We are moving to war-fighting readiness. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready. And frankly, to show them that we're ready.
Yeah, we're ready, all right. What are we ready for? I'm nothing really, I'm not sure. We're not really ready for anything, for heaven's sake. Other breaking bits of news, sales of UK retailers were down last month. Spending on food and clothing dipped 2.7% in May. That's down. Retail sales, so no VAT for old Rachel Thieves. And also the Treasury borrowed 17.7 billion quid last month. It's going really well, isn't it? Also, Lloyds Bank's moving a load of money out of the British markets into America. Dear me. Is there any good news? Oh yeah, there is some good news. 1 in 20 homes now cost £1 million. Great. It's all right if you've got one. And the turtle's been spotted off the coast of Devon. And the weather's going to be great. So there we are. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And breathe. Hopefully the Russians, says Ian, won't find out how easy it is to access and vandalise our warplanes. Now we're on a war footing and all that. Also, good to see the Labour government isn't ageist. Last week they voted for assisted dying up to birth, and today they'll be voting for it post-birth. So that's all right then, says Ian in Newark. Yeah, I mean, there was a good piece in the Mail, actually, by Stephen Glover this week. Why is the left so obsessed with killing us all? Let's ask John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. Very good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Mike.
Thank goodness we're on a war footing, because otherwise it could be really, really easy to break into one of our RAF military installations.
Very embarrassing.
I mean, it really is. It's really bad.
It's not good, and it shouldn't have been possible. You're quite right. I mean, it's obviously hyperbole to suggest that this should be treated as a terrorist incident and they should be shot on sight, but.
Well, it is, but it's also
embarrassing
not. I mean, if you broke into a US military installation in America, or even in Diego Garcia, I mean, you'd probably find yourself in quite a bit of serious trouble.
I'm not sure you'd be shot, but
you might be. Because I mean, if you saw two people on scooters, racing towards a plane, you don't know whether they've got you don't know what they're going to do.
No, I mean, yeah, mad. It's not good. It's embarrassing, but it's not the end of the world.
It's not the end of the world, but it could have been the end of the Bryce Norton airfield. You know, if they'd had a nuclear device on them or something, if they were Iranian. I mean, let me ask you about that, because I don't know whether you do, what our policy is should America decide to attack Iran, because it's not that clear that Keir Starmer knows what his policy is yet.
Well, he says in one breath that the one thing that mustn't happen is that Iran gets a nuclear weapon. But when Israel does something about it, he calls for de-escalation. So it sounds as if there's a bit of a contradiction there. But yeah. I'm not sure.
I mean, a vacuum, it seems to me.
No, I don't think so. I think it's very clear what his position is actually, which is that he's not in favour of military action against Iran.
Right.
He wants negotiations instead.
But he doesn't quite say it, does he?
Yes, he does. He said negotiations are better than conflict.
No, he hasn't. No, but he said all that before Donald Trump said, because the last thing he said about Donald Trump was when he was interviewed by Beth Rigby. He said, "I'm pretty sure that you shouldn't be interpreting what Donald Trump said as him about to launch an attack, because I don't think he's going to." He
turned out to be right about that, didn't he, Mike?
Well, no.
Because
Donald
Trump yesterday said I'll give him 2 weeks. Now, 2 weeks for Donald Trump means never.
Or it could mean tomorrow.
Well, it could, but I mean, I don't get the impression that I mean, there's an awful lot of talk about the parallels with Iraq, but
which is rubbish, by the way.
What?
Which is rubbish, by the way, because there are no parallels with Iraq.
Well, I think the situation is very different because neither Keir Starmer nor Donald Trump actually are keen on military action.
No.
In this case, I mean, Donald Trump thought that those negotiations that he was having with the Iranians were making progress. We expected him to be upset because the Israelis just cut short that process and took unilateral action themselves.
But they acted on the report that was done by the IAEA, didn't they? Because I saw that report, and what they actually said was entirely contrary to what the Iranians were supposed to have agreed to do, and that's why Israel acted. So I think on that basis, Trump was quite happy that they did that, and I think he's also quite happy that they're doing what he might have had to do for him, if you like.
Well, as Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, put it, Israel is doing our dirty work for us.
And I think Israel have more or less hinted that that's kind of what they feel like as well.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that Donald Trump actually does think that. I mean, Donald Trump is is very hard to read at the best of times. But he I think thought that the negotiation was the way to go. And when Israel struck, I think he was a bit thrown and confused, and it took him a little while to sort out his line.
Maybe. But my reading of it, and you know, you may say that I'm no more clued up on this than you are, but my reading of it is that, you know, having thought about it, maybe he wasn't keen initially, but having thought about it, for him this is a bit like another stage in the negotiation process.
Well, exactly. I think that's what he's tried to turn it into.
Yeah.
Except that yesterday he by giving Iran 2 more weeks, I think he sort of undermined his own negotiating position, because you know, if Iran was scared that the US was going to intervene at any moment, then you think that might
I think that's kind of where they are, though, isn't it? Because he's basically said, by saying, you know, I'll give you a couple of weeks, it kind of means, and if you do anything stupid in that period, you know, I'm afraid you're going to get hit.
Well, yeah, let's see. I mean, the problem I think with 2 weeks is that it's just too long.
Yeah, but I don't think 2 weeks is necessarily the thing. But we could go round and round on this. But I still think that Keir Starmer, partly because he doesn't know what America's doing, because they're clearly not telling him, and also partly because he doesn't know what Israel are doing, because they're not telling him either. He doesn't really have a position. And so when the Downing Street press spokesman was asked yesterday, are you going to be supportive of an American strike on Iran? They said, well, we're not going to answer any hypotheticals. Well, it's not really a hypothetical, is it? It's a fairly important part of government policy.
It is, but it is hypothetical at this stage because
But I also heard Emily Thornberry yesterday talking on another station about how she was one of those who was in favour of what Lord Hermer's position is, which is that we shouldn't really be involved in any kind of attack on Iran unless we're attacked first, which is not great military policy, it doesn't seem to me. Let's wait till we get blown away before we do anything.
Well, exactly. I mean, that doesn't really take into account the preemptive nature of this strike. I mean, if Iran is on the verge of acquiring a nuclear weapon, then I think it is incumbent on other countries to act.
Yes.
And the fact that Israel alone is acting is in a sense, allowing other countries just to sort of hide behind words and obscurantism.
Yes.
But I think Keir Starmer's position is pretty clear. Actually, I think he
clear as mud.
He's not in favour of military action. But if the US goes ahead with it, he will. He's not going to condemn them for doing that.
He's positioning himself for a future. He's positioning himself for a future U-turn, surely, because that's his now policy on everything. It's the U-turn on it, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, has he seen the polls yet?
Well,
he needs another opinion poll, then he can decide what his position.
Well, he should look at that one that came out yesterday that's put Labour into third place, which is not very encouraging.
That was not very encouraging. No, but I was going to say the tricky decision for him is Diego Garcia, the base in.
Well, that's another hypothetical, according to the Downing Street spokesman.
Well, yeah, it's not. I mean, that's a bit more.
That's definitely not hypothetical, because you must have a policy. And
exactly. We have just negotiated a treaty with Mauritius, which allows us to continue to use the Diego Garcia base.
Yeah.
And presumably on the basis that the Americans can do what they like with it.
Well, it's an American base, isn't it? So we can hardly say to them, you can't use your own base.
Well, it's an American base, but it is British territory. Well, it's
no,
now
it's not British territory, though.
It's leased back to the British.
Right.
It's not leased to the Americans. So
but technically speaking, if Mauritius said that they could use it, then they can.
No, I don't think that's how it works. I think there's some complicated stuff in the treaty about we have to let Mauritius know if an attack
but we don't have a
veto launched from that base.
But I don't think
after the event.
Yeah, but I don't think we have a veto on whether anybody uses it in the first place, which is why a lot of people who didn't think we should have let it go are saying that's why we shouldn't have let it go, because now look at what we've got ourselves into.
No, I think the position between us and the Americans hasn't changed. I mean, I think technically the Americans require our permission to use that base.
Right. But I mean, they kind of have. They have had in the past anyway a sort of continued use of that base. So why would we ever say they can't use it? The only question now is that we may not have the final say.
Well, no, we would have the final say, because it's still our base. We've leased it back. The question is whether Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, decides, if he decides it's against international law for the Americans to launch an attack from that base, do we deny the Americans?
Yeah, but when you rent a flat from somebody, right, and you want to move somebody else in as a subletter, you have to ask the owner, and the owner is Mauritius.
No, we're the owner.
No, we're not. You just said we rented it back.
No, it's leased back.
Well, that's the same as a rental. Your name is rental.
It's not a rental.
Your bloody name's rental. It's the same thing.
It's our base for 99 years, Mike.
Yes, but it's at least it's the same as a rental. Surely you don't own it. You don't own it if you're leasing it. That's why we sold it to them. Except we didn't sell it to them. We gave them money to take it away.
No, but we have total rights over it, as are specified in the treaty, which is what.
So what's changed
people
then?
Are going over with a fine tooth comb.
So what's changed? So why did we bother giving it to Mauritius then, if it's exactly the same as it was before?
I don't know, Mike. I thought it was a terrible deal. I thought Prime Minister was extremely.
So we've given them loads of money, billions and billions of pounds, 30 billion.
165 million a year, which is far more than.
Yes, 30 billion.
Someone tried to pretend it was an average of 101 million a year. I mean, it was absolutely disgraceful.
Right. But he got those numbers. I think he got those numbers from Rachel Reeves, who can't add up. But I mean, so we've basically decided to have something stay as it is, but we've decided to pay a bucket load of money to some foreign entity to pretend that it's exactly the same.
I thought I still think it was a very bad deal, completely unjustified.
Yeah.
And I think every time it comes up, Keir Starmer struggles to explain the rationale.
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. Let me ask you about Vicky Foxcroft. We spoke earlier to Steve Baker about this. Labour whip has quit over the government's welfare cut, saying that, you know, in all good conscience she can't stay doing the job that she's doing. I spoke to Steve Baker, as I say earlier on, the former Tory minister. He thinks it's quite a significant sort of departure for somebody.
It is a significant. I mean,
somebody who's been so loyal to the party as a whip for such a long time.
Well, she did actually vote against the party on Article 50, if you remember all that. Brexit.
Oh, really?
Brexit nonsense. I mean, she was very pro EU at the time.
Okay.
But she wasn't. She didn't have to resign from the front bench on that occasion.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's a very significant resignation because she's a whip. I mean, it's the whips who have to go around persuading Labour MPs not to rebel. And that was her job, and she decided she couldn't face doing it.
Right.
And I think that does suggest that there's going to be a very significant rebellion when it comes to the vote.
Right. And it won't be big. It won't be big enough to derail anything, will it? But it will be.
I don't think so.
It will be a matter of conscience for a lot of them, and so therefore it's going to be more bad news for Starmer, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but I think it could. I think it could be a very, very big rebellion. I mean, you're right. I mean, with a majority of whatever it is, 100. I mean, a working majority of over 150.
Yeah.
I don't think the government is going to lose it, but it's going to be really embarrassing to have that many Labour MPs voting against the government.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just looking at the Telegraph piece about her resignation, they've got an incredible statistic here, which I hadn't seen before, apropos of nothing at all. The monthly cost of universal credit to migrants from outside the British Isles, and this is a DWP figure, has gone from 500 million to over $1 billion. Or just under $1 billion, sorry. So it's practically doubled since 2022. You know, we used to be told that, you know, migrants aren't allowed to get benefits, but obviously they are. Monthly cost of universal credit, nearly £1 billion.
What, for people born outside
for migrants
the UK?
from outside the British Isles, yeah.
Yeah, those figures are a bit dodgy. But I mean,
the Department of Work and Pension figures, they're government figures.
No, but I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, those are people presumably who we want to have here, and may well be getting universal credit because they're in work, but on fairly low.
Well, why
pay.
do we want them here if we're having to give them benefits? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, I agree, and Angela Rayner agrees with you and me both on
well,
that.
yeah, but she also wants to give them
one of her
houses as well.
suggestions to Rachel Reeves on how to save money.
Yeah,
would tighten up some of the. Some of the eligibility of recent immigrants to benefits.
It is absolutely ridiculous. One final one. There's going to be more trouble looming on the NHS front, it seems. Front page of the Times today. Consultants want to have a 35% pay rise because apparently, you know, 6 figures ain't enough for them. And they're talking about going on strike throughout the summer. In addition to already the junior doctors who are going to go on strike. So Wes Streeting's going to have a big problem, isn't he?
Yeah, no, it's I mean, it's very bad. I mean, you know, Wes Streeting trumpeted the fact that he'd settled the dispute when he came in. This just goes to show. I mean, the junior doctors have no political sense whatsoever,
no.
and now we discover that the consultants have no political sense whatsoever. If they want to destroy the NHS, then this is the way to go about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's absolutely irresponsible and a very great shame. I mean, I understand, you know, from a very narrow point of view, they feel their pay has fallen behind and all the rest of it. But they've got to look at the bigger picture, which is that the NHS is in danger.
Yeah, and they've got to be a bit more realistic about the world and the way that the world works and the way that they're seen by people who have got nowhere near their sort of salary, and in fact probably 5 times less in many respects. But there we are. Anyway, John, very entertaining. Thank you very much indeed. John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent. If you can figure out his explanation of the Chagos Islands deal, you're a better man than I am. John, on the weather, have a look.
Good morning, Mike. This is John from West Wales. Just listen to your thing about the world's going to burn. It's going to be 46 degrees. It's come to West Wales. We've got 20 degrees. It's cloudy. We've got a chance of rain tomorrow and the next day. Come to Wales. If you don't like it warm, come to West Wales. Carmarthen, fantastic place. Thank you. Have a good day. Oh, don't forget, Factor 123 sun cream.
Yeah, don't forget. I mean, Darren's in Kamal. Then he normally sends us a voice note. Maybe he's out there trying to get a bit of a suntan. Of course, yeah. Listen, Tim Montgomery didn't like it either. He said he didn't like the hot weather. I know I do like it. I haven't got a problem. It's time for Gaff-Prone Friday. Let's have one from Jeremy Kyle.
The obvious counter to that is to shut the Straits of Hormuz so oil can't get out.
It was my phone, Chris. That's how unprofessional I am. I just got an alert, a news alert. I didn't know it was on.
It's to shut the Straits of Hormuz.
His face. Sorry, Jeremy. This from an angry mum called C. I have 2 sons in the military and the RAF Bryce Norton breach is worrying. This is treasonable action, and if we need to get planes in the air to defend Cyprus, we can't now because the jets can't be refuelled. Let's hope a shoot-to-kill directive is now put in place by the new head of HM Forces. These people make me sick and frankly are enemies of the state. For God's sake, Starmer, grow some balls and defend our country and the brave sons and daughters in our forces. Well said, C. Sarah in West Sussex says Palestine Action need to be prescribed, presumably as a terrorist group. Absolutely right. And Ray says, good morning, Mike. The attack on RAF Bryce Norton is an act of terrorism. The terrorists involved should have been shot on sight. This is Talk. We'll be back after this.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sussex now.
Flynn has said, Samara, I agree with you all the time, but you're just boring.
Hi! I refuse to work for ITV ever again. Oh! What Just Happened? Fridays at 9 on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 9:26 and there's an awful lot going on this morning. Of course, we're going to talk a lot about this Bryce Norton break-in at the RAF military base. Morning, Mike. Isn't it sad when the commercial airport was better protected than a military airbase, says Clay in Folkestone. Do we really need to hear Starmer's waffle on Bryce Norton? All he'll say is we are asking for de-escalation, says Leslie. And Ian says, from the clip you showed on the Bryce Norton escapade, it looks as though they were riding bicycles. How the hell did they get them in? Well, it looks like they're right. I think we can see scooters, I think, is what they did. It seems as though they somehow breached the perimeter fence and then scooted in to where the planes are, which may or may not have been on a runway or maybe not been in a hangar. I'm not entirely sure. But we will, of course, get to all the details on that as they come in. Morning, Mike, says Jane. Well, I think I've done that one. Let's talk now, though, about what the situation is in Israel, because we spoke earlier on in the show and yesterday as well to some people who are trapped in Israel. They can't get out. They're British citizens. They can't actually find their way out. They're giving advice. The advice they're being given by the Foreign Office is to try and make their own way to the Egyptian border or possibly the Jordanian border. But let's talk now to Michael Kotler-Wunsch, who is Israel's Special Envoy for combating anti-Semitism and a former member of the Israeli Parliament. We've also got Barak Sina as Associate Fellow of the Henry Jackson Society. Michael, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. How are things in Israel at the moment? We've been watching over the past few days an awful lot of missiles flying in. So many of them that many of them have got through. Some casualties, a hospital being hit. You know, lots of civilians, properties being destroyed. What's it been like for the last 24 hours?
So, Mike, we're all holding our breath for what, has been prevented again, actually, by the IDF intercepting many of the rockets and UAVs intended to, again, send millions of Israeli civilians into shelter. You're right that tens of Israelis have been murdered by these ballistic missiles intentionally targeting civilians. Hundreds have been injured and thousands have lost their homes in what is already a 7-day ongoing attack of these ballistic missiles that, of course, the state of Israel had no other choice in an existential war for its life that has been ongoing for more than 20 months, launched with the October 7 massacre about 21 months ago.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt with that. I mean, the British government is slightly less enthusiastic about it, unfortunately, I'm afraid. I still can't quite work out what Keir Starmer's view is. He just keeps talking about de-escalation. But obviously, from your point of view, Mikhail, you can't really de-escalate a war with people who want to destroy you.
Well, I want to say, and Mike, the previous segment about the Palestine Action attack on the RAF base, I think should be sounding sirens, not just for the state of Israel, but indeed in the UK and around the world that cherishes the values of life and of liberty that we have created, because what they signal is not just the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism that we've seen alongside this 21-month-long war, including in the UK with a tsunami of anti-Semitism, but in fact the mainstreaming of terror, the mainstreaming of the Islamic Republic of Iran that actually not only has this ring of fire around the state of Israel with all of its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, but in fact has embedded itself in democratic countries in order to be able to advance their genocidal intent, openly declaring to build an alternate reality on the rubble of our civilization, not only annihilate the state of Israel, the small devil, and destroy the United States, the big devil, but in fact to destroy the foundations of our democracies. That is the siren that should be sounding, recognizing that terror and tyranny can never be appeased. It's not just about dishonor, it's about life and death. Appeasing terror is the sure way to continue this raging war on our shared civilization.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And as far as the military situation goes, with what Israel has been able to dismantle, shall we say, over the past week in Iran, what is the belief in the military there? I know that you don't speak for them, but what's their belief about how much they've been able to kind of denude Iran's capabilities?
Look, we know that there has been significant impact on the nuclear capabilities of enrichment. We know that hundreds of launchers have been ruined, basically destroyed. So the moment that they continue to have ballistic missiles, and we have to be very clear, those ballistic missiles, those that get through the interceptions, cause tremendous damage. The havoc that they have wreaked, as we said, the murder, the destruction, the targeting of hospitals have been with ballistic missiles without nuclear warheads. But in fact, those launchers enable those ballistic missiles to continue. And we know that the information, if you will, the collective memory of how to continue recreating nuclear capabilities, ballistic capabilities, and the dissemination of these terror proxies around the world, we know that that too has been derailed with Israel's continued attack on military targets. We have to be very clear, singularly on military targets, whether it's individuals, bases, or the places in which they continue to enable the construction of the materials that they need and the enrichment of the nuclear capabilities and the ballistic missiles. In that sense, the IDF, the IAF, have done heroic work and in the front lines of what is, as I predict, a raging war of barbarism on our civilization. What is happening in Israel should be serving the democratic countries and all who cherish life and liberty to see that the experiment on the ground, if you will, what Israel is on the front lines of, should be learned from, so that the world wakes up to what is a rising threat, a real threat to the foundations of all of our democracies in a world in which, in an Orwellian inversion of fact and law, and you mentioned before the UK's sort of very, we'll call it lukewarm response to what the state of Israel is doing in this existential war. But I would argue this existential war threatens not only the state of Israel, the Jew among nations. We are, in fact, on the front lines of what is a raging war of barbarism on our shared civilization. And I would argue that democracies around the world and all that cherish the foundational principles of life and liberty should be alarmed, including, for example, to the fact that today, none other than the foreign ministry of the criminal Islamic regime in Iran will be addressing none other than the Human Rights Council. I cannot describe any more of an Orwellian inverted reality than that showcased by that.
I know, it is extraordinary, isn't it? Mikhail, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Appreciate it, and we wish you all the best there. Mikhail Kotler-Wunsch there, speaking from Israel, as they take on yet more military action in Iran against Iran, and as the Iranians continue to fire missiles into Israel. Let's talk to Barak Sina, Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Barak, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. I mean, what's your view of the current situation? Donald Trump says he's going to give the Iranians a couple of weeks. I mean, there are some who think that's not necessarily how long it will last, and that he might strike earlier than that, or some others who think actually that means he's not going to do anything at all.
Look, Donald Trump is a master at making people guess, keeping people really spinning, and it's possible that it's just like Israel and America duped Iran by saying, look, we don't want to have regime change, we want to have negotiations, and then Israel finally intervened, but that was clearly coordinated with the US. It's possible that Donald Trump is keeping the mullah on their toes. So we don't know, and it's just speculative at best.
Right. And in terms of the Iranian threats, you know, they threatened the great Satan and the small Satan, and they make a lot of noise about, you know, wreaking havoc on the world. I mean, they're not really going to do that, are they?
Look, the Iranian regime is founded on the principles of the Iranian Revolution, which is not about regime survivability or spreading the revolution to just simply the Middle East. It wants to export the revolution globally. So therefore, the Iranian regime is wedded to the nuclear facilities. It's impossible to distinguish between the two and say, okay, look, Iran is going to engage in negotiations with good faith in order to give up its nuclear enrichment capabilities in order to preserve their survivability. The Iranian regime sees its survivability as based on having these nuclear weapons, these ballistic missiles, the ability to export terrorism. So you're talking about a terrorist regime. So nothing short of toppling the regime is really in question. It's impossible to speak about taking out the nuclear facilities without talking about toppling the regime. They're both synonymous one with the other.
Yes, and the people in Iran would seem to be, as far as I'm aware anyway, very much in favour of toppling the regime.
Look, it's really difficult to tell because it's possible to have two ideas at once. You know, on one hand, you can hate the regime, but on the other hand, you can say, you know, screw Israel. Why are these bombs falling on our heads? You know, what did we do? So what emerges out of this ambiguous reality is unknown. Is it going to cause people to rally around the flag, or is it going to cause people to have greater opposition to the regime? We have no idea.
Barak, thank you very much indeed. Barak Sina there, Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Now, it's time for this.
Alright, kid, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and £5 grand spending money, all you gotta do is text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Sorted. Right, here's all the legal stuff. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You've got to have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester, CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com.
So you see, you thought Oasis Live 25 was sold out, but we can still get you in. Not just for the tickets, though. We'll put you up for a night in a hotel, put $5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free, and that's all you have to know. It's brilliant. We'll be bringing you more of that as the days and weeks go on. And let's have a word with Isabel, who's in South Bucks. Hello, Isabel.
Oh, hello, Mike. I just wanted to say that just before COVID, I did take a friend up to Bryce Norton, a doctor, to be flown out to Akrotiri in Cyprus.
Yeah.
I was absolutely amazed when we got to the gate that it was manned by civilians.
Really?
And the whole thing was completely amateur. Nobody was interested. So casual, sloppy clothes, sloppy attitude. And I thought, goodness me, here is a potential for great security breaches.
That's astonishing, isn't it? And so you were sort of able to, were you able to go in?
Oh, yes, no problem. No problem whatsoever. Nobody cared. Nobody was interested.
Right. And you just wandered around inside?
Well, we didn't wander around. I mean, he had a plane to catch, and he went about his business, and I saw off. But to me, it just was not my idea of how a military base should have operated.
No, absolutely right. Thanks for letting us know, Isabel. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get a voice note from Daniel.
Hi, Mike. Daniel calling from Jerusalem here. Regarding your stories that I just saw you breaking on RAF bases being broken into, it's terrible, it's sad, but it's not surprising for everyone, not just in Israel, but in the Middle East, by the way. You will not see pro-Palestine protest in UAE or Saudi Arabia. They understand the direct link between these so-called freedom, liberation, peaceful marches, with they're not. You know, they're directly linked to Iran, they're directly linked to anti-Semitism, they're directly linked to terrorism. There is a reason why you never, ever, ever see a British flag carried alongside a Palestinian flag. You know, they hate the West and everything the West stands for. They hate Britain and everything British values stand for. And it's really sad that they are committing terrorism, jeopardizing the security of British people. Sad, but not surprising.
Yeah, it is sad. It's absolutely shocking, actually. Daniel on the RAF break-in there at Bryce Norton. If you haven't joined us, if you've only just joined us, RAF Bryce Norton has been broken into by two Palestine Action activists, basically. Palestinian Action, say two of its activists broke into the RAF base in Oxfordshire and sprayed red paint into the engines of two Airbus Voyager aircraft. Absolutely ridiculous. If we can't stop a terror attack by Palestine supporters on electric scooters, how is he going to stop the rubber dinghy, says Tony in Barrow in Furness. When is a terrorist not a terrorist, says Ian in Lancashire? When they are an activist. It's just words. If you attack the British military, you are a terrorist and an enemy of the UK. They are traitors. Absolutely right. And Donald says, I worked at an American airbase, and if you went near an aircraft without permission, they would shoot you. 100%. He's in Bicester. For heaven's sake. Coming up next, our favourite wine lady, Helena Nicklin, is here. Award-winning drinks writer, TV presenter, one of the three drinkers, you know, a woman of many talents. She's going to talk to us about why there might be a wine shortage. Crikey. And that's really serious. 9:41.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:43. I'm Mike Graham. Ian says, Lord Hermer is a personification of computer says no. He is. One here from Paul. He says, why is John Renton always defending Starmer and the Labour Party? These activists at Bryce Norton may have had a bomb, not spray paint, and should have been shot. We are war ready, as we have been told. Great show as always. Paul, thank you very much indeed. Just before we talk to Helen Nicklin, have a look at this. Plank of the week tonight, 7 o'clock.
It's trampolining, cinema trips, purchases at JD Sports and PC World. This is for asylum seekers.
Yeah, migrants.
This is not for not for people who pay their taxes into the community. This isn't for disadvantaged children or anything like that. No, it's for asylum seekers, illegal migrants who break into this country and then are given all these things.
Yeah.
And then also TV licenses.
TV licenses, yeah.
TV licenses, things that we break down granny's doors to get them to pay. No, you can have it for free if you come here on a boat.
Well, and that's Plank of the Week, coming up at 7 o'clock tonight. Don't miss it. Helena Nicklin's here, our favourite award-winning drinks writer. Haven't seen you for a long time. Helena, very good morning to you.
Good morning. It has been ages.
It has. I don't know where the time goes. Anyway, we're getting into summer. You know, it's a lovely summer's week. We've been having, you know, people are having lots of time sitting outside pubs and sitting out in gardens and wine bars and all of that. But shock of horrors, apparently there's going to be a wine shortage.
I know. I mean, first world problems, let's just say that right now. But yeah, it's true, there will be probably a lack of certain kinds of wines just for a few weeks, but it really is only certain kinds of wines.
Okay, which kinds?
So we're talking like the much sort of cheaper end of things, all New World pretty much, things like McGuigan, things like Hardy's.
Okay.
And that's because those cheaper wines from the New World are shipped in bulk, and this is a UK bottling line.
Oh, yes. Because I remember you surprising me once by telling me that, in fact, an awful lot of the wine that we drink in this country is not actually imported in bottles. It's imported in great big sort of barrels and maybe even bigger things and then bottled here.
It is. It certainly is at the cheaper end. Not so much from Europe, to be honest. But yeah, it does actually make a lot more sense in terms of pricing. It keeps the prices down, and actually, you know, it's not so bad for quality these days as well, and it's much more sustainable.
Right.
So it's no bad thing. But yeah, there might be a lack of some of your big brands on the shelves for a bit, but there's plenty of other wine.
And it's because workers are going on strike in the bottling plants.
Yes, it's a strike over pay because I think they were after more than the 3.2% they were being offered. So that's the reason. But they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot a bit, I think, because people will just move on to other wine brands that are available.
Yeah, and also it might be an interesting manoeuvre for the wine can business. I was actually with some people the other day who were drinking wine out of cans, and I remembered again you were the first person to introduce me to that. And that's really a growing business. They're quite good, aren't they?
Yeah, they've got a lot better. I mean, let's be clear, about 5 years ago, they were terrible, really kind of sulphurous and stinky and bad wine. Yeah, but now you can get some really lovely ones, and it's chill.
Yeah. That's all good. And so what's the big thing this year? What's going to be the thing that people are going to be drinking this year that they haven't been drinking before?
Well, in terms of wine styles, there's the trend is very much towards really light, crisp whites and lighter reds that you can chill that aren't as alcoholic as some of the big, you know, New World bombs at 15%. And mid wines are trending. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about these myself, but those are, these are wines that are made only to about between 7 and 9% ABV.
Okay.
So technically have more of them.
Yes.
But
that's interesting. So does that have, I mean, obviously the benefit of that is that you don't get as tiddly, I suppose, as you would if you were drinking a proper wine. But is there any other benefit? Is it like less calories or something?
Fewer calories, yes, because there's less alcohol in that way. But we do need to bear in mind that if you take alcohol out, it's going to feel quite thin, and so that gets often replaced by sugar. So they're not necessarily better for you, I would say. Personally, I mean, not everyone will agree with me, but yeah, they need the sugar to have that body that's been lost.
And who's making these mid wines? Is it Universal, or who's making them?
Well, a couple of big brands. It came in from Australia and New Zealand. So McGuigan really started the trend there. But Sainsbury's now have their own range, and there are lots of independent mid-wine brands as well.
Right.
Cotton Two have just released some 8%ers, and actually they're pretty good.
Okay. I mean, maybe we'll have to try them out. We'll have to get you in and sample some of this stuff. Because there is a trend now, isn't there? I keep reading about it anyway. I mean, you don't see it because everywhere I go at the moment, certainly this week, you know, every pub is like rammed with people. I was at one last night, and you could barely get in the door, and you could barely get in the door because there were so many people outside drinking. But apparently there is a trend now for people not to actually drink as much alcohol.
Yes. I mean, it's
not
huge.
Here, by the way.
Well, not in my house either, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, loads of people there's zebra striping, which is sort of one on, one off. Lots of people have just, especially slightly the older generation, have just stopped drinking because it makes them feel terrible as well, and they've really realised that that's what's doing it. Right. And the younger folk aren't drinking as much for lots of different reasons, including health and looking good on Instagram and not being caught doing anything stupid.
And it's also quite expensive as well, especially to do it out on the town.
Oh my goodness, isn't it just? I went into a restaurant the other day and a normal glass of Provençal rosé was £15.
Yeah, that's quite normal now. It's really extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so it's no wonder that people are thinking about not drinking or choosing cheaper options.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, my son, who's up in Manchester, you know, keeps telling me that he finds these places up in Manchester, and I'm sure people will accuse me of being a bit Londonist here. But, you know, he's found a place where you can get a pint for £2.50 and a free pizza. And I was like, crikey, that's pretty good value. But, you know, down in London, you can't get a pint of any beer for less than about £8 now.
I know, it's ridiculous. I mean, the VAT and the duty, all of those taxes went up massively on the 1st of February as well, which hasn't helped. Plus, there's been a glass bottle shortage, which makes glass more expensive. All the kind of, you know, and all the paperwork now we've got importing stuff. Right. Everything's more expensive, and it's too much.
So when do you think this bottle shortage is going to kick in then, as far as the next few weeks is concerned?
Yeah, well, the strikes finish, I think, on the 5th of July. But so we'll be looking towards the end of this month. We might start seeing fewer New World cheapy wines on the shelves. So you know, maybe it's just great marketing.
Maybe.
You might want to go out and stock up on your favourite brands.
There's always a box of wine as well, isn't there? They're quite big now as well.
Yes, and they are again much better. I know than they used to be. We did a tasting not so long ago with some of the good box wines, and there are some really lovely ones now.
No, cool. Well, listen, hopefully we'll see you soon. Maybe we'll have to organise something. We shall get onto that. Helena Nicklin, thank you very much. Have you got any projects you want to plug since you're here?
Oh, well, there's my new wine course, which you are a member of.
Of course.
HelenaSips.com. Yes, I'm just writing a lot at the moment and doing lots of social media stuff. And of course, I'll be at Gig in the Garden.
Of course, I'll see you there. Brilliant. Yeah. Fantastic. Helena Nicklin there. Yeah, she's got a wine academy now, of which I'm a sort of trustee, believe it or not. I think I can say that, can I? Without fear or favour. We'll be back with some phone calls in a minute, or should we do them now? You want to do them now? No, afterwards. OK. I'll get a voice note from Gail then.
Hi Mike, Gailey from Manchester. Super show as always. Can I just mention how fast the government can make these controversial changes when it suits them? I mean, look how fast new abortion laws were passed. They could just as easily stop all the benefits that are attracting the boatfuls of migrants, but they simply do not want to. Anyway, mowing over. Have a great day.
I will indeed. It's a lovely day out there, Gail. Thank you very much indeed, although not so nice in Carmarthen, apparently. It's a bit cloudy. But there we are. 9:52, back after this. Bye.
you can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not one.
time. Don't tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people. Then we can solve that problem like that.
Won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted, laying down a ruling on what is a woman. You and I have been speaking for far too many years about
And
this.
actually, you know, I'm very grateful to you too, because you have always covered this topic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, of course, with you just for about another 5 minutes or so. The breaking news this morning, pro-Palestinian activists have broken into RAF Bryce Norton undetected and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint. It's a group called Palestine Action. They broke in, one riding on a scooter and hit 2 Airbus Voyager air-to-air refuelling tankers, appearing to spray paint onto the jet engine. The group referenced RAF flights over Gaza out of its base in Cyprus and said the supply planes had been put out of service while the activists were able to evade security and arrest. Ministry of Defence strongly condemned the vandalism of Royal Air Force assets and said it was working closely with the police who were investigating. How the hell do you get into an RAF base, spray paint over an engine of a plane and get away without being in some way detained or shot? For heaven's sake, we're going to talk to Anthony and David in a moment, but it's Gaff Prone Friday, so we're going to give Richard Tice a little run out on this one. He asked a question in Parliament, and it wasn't really about anything you might expect.
Mr. Speaker, it's important to celebrate the awards given to honourable colleagues, so will the leader join me in congratulating both the Deputy Prime Minister and also the honourable member for Clacton for winning the award in their respective categories as Britain's sexiest politicians and that well-known website illicitencounters.com. Does she recommend they have dinner together?
I'm sure the Deputy Prime Minister has got a very full diary, washing her hair and the like, so that it might not be possible for her to have dinner with the honourable member.
It might not be possible indeed. Let's have a word with Anthony in Southend. Anthony, very good morning to you.
Oh, good morning, Mike. A quick note about prices of pints in London. I went to Covent Garden yesterday, and it cost me £9 for a pint of beer.
Crikey.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it shows you how long I haven't bought a beer for.
Fell over.
That's ridiculous. Well, I mean, it wasn't that long ago I bought a pint, and it was only 8, so they're going up by the month now. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Look,
what do you want to say about the RAF?
Yeah, but this thing at Bryce, I'm really quite surprised to see this morning.
Yeah.
My son's in the army, and I took him up to Bryce on 2 or 3 occasions to fly out to Afghanistan when there was a shooting war going on. And I'll tell you then, the security, just to get in to say goodbye to him or pick him up, was quite strict.
Yeah.
And very, very on point. And I'm shocked with what I saw on your programme a few minutes ago, how easy it was. And I'm sure in those days when it was Afghanistan that we were dealing with, you'd have been shot if you'd have been wandering around the...
Definitely. I mean, it appears now that these pair managed to get in. Thanks for your call, Anthony. They've managed to get in and out again without even being apprehended. David, very quick 20 seconds if you've got them. Thanks very much.
Well, just very quickly, Mike.
Yeah.
I mean, I was up at RAF Fairford when they were doing the renewal of the airfield in 25 years ago, and we were warned categorically if you stepped out of line anywhere that you weren't supposed to be, you could be shot, and that was it.
Right. Well, you'd think so. But these guys seem to have gone in and out without even being detected. Alex Phillips is here. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
What's going on at the
I know
RAF?
you have to worry about that because, I mean, these might just be some sort of woke, mad, pro-Gaza lunatics.
Yeah.
But if they can break into what should be a hyper-secure, one of our biggest...
And leave.
RAF bases.
Worse.
Yeah, I know. Go undetected and cause damage to our craft. I mean, you do have to wonder who else might be able to do that.
And these are also aircraft